Welcome back to Sleepless historian Salavora. Tonight, we begin one of the greatest journeys ever preserved in human history. Long before mighty Rome covered Europe with roads. Long before the pharaohs raised the pyramids that still dominate the Egyptian horizon. Long before the philosophers of Greece asked questions about the stars. Another civilization flourished between two rivers. Its people built the world's first great cities. They invented writing, measured the heavens, recorded the movement of planets, raised enormous temples that seemed to touch the sky. Yet despite all of their astonishing knowledge, many had forgotten the one who created the heavens they studied. Tonight, we travel nearly 4,000 years into the past. To the land that many historians call the cradle of civilization. It is here that one child would be born. A child whose questions would shake kings, challenge empires, break idols, and forever change the spiritual history of humanity. This is the story of Prophet Ibrahim AS, the father of prophets. Imagine standing at sunrise upon the highest tower of an ancient city. Below you stretches a landscape unlike anything the ancient world had ever seen. Thousands of homes built from sun-dried bricks. Wide canals carrying fresh water through the city. Merchants arriving from distant lands. Priests climbing enormous step temples. Astronomers watching the stars before dawn. The air smells of fresh clay, baked bread, burning incense, and river water. This is not Egypt. Not Greece. Not Rome. These civilizations have yet to rise. You are standing in Mesopotamia. The land between two rivers. The birthplace of cities. The birthplace of writing. The birthplace of recorded history. But beneath all this greatness lies a question that no scholar, priest, or king has yet answered. Who truly created the heavens? The rivers? The stars? The human soul? Soon, one young man will dare to ask that question. And the answer will echo across thousands of years. A world before empires. To understand Ibrahim AS, we must first understand his world. Thousands of years ago, human civilization looked very different. There were no nations as we know them today. No airplanes crossing the sky. No highways. No electricity. No printed books. Most people never traveled farther than a few days from where they were born. The world felt enormous. Mysterious. Dangerous. Unknown. Every distant mountain seemed to hide another kingdom. Every river disappeared toward lands no traveler had ever fully explored. Maps were incomplete. Knowledge moved only as fast as camels could walk. And yet, human civilization had already begun accomplishing extraordinary things. The gift of two rivers. Ancient Mesopotamia owed its existence to two rivers. The Tigris and the Euphrates. Flowing from the mountains of modern-day Turkey, these rivers traveled hundreds of miles before reaching the Persian Gulf. Each year, seasonal floods covered surrounding lands with fertile soil. Where desert might otherwise have dominated. Fields of barley and wheat flourished. Palm groves stretched across the horizon. Shepherds guided enormous flocks through green pastures. Villages became towns. Towns became cities. Cities became kingdoms. Without these rivers, Mesopotamia would never have existed. The first great cities. Imagine seeing one of humanity's first true cities. Unlike scattered villages, these places never truly slept. Before sunrise, farmers already walked toward distant fields. Potters shaped clay jars. Blacksmiths heated bronze tools. Children carried water from public wells. Merchants prepared caravans filled with wool, copper, spices, timber, and precious stones. Every profession depended upon another. Society itself had become more complex than ever before. Among these cities were names still remembered today. Ur, Uruk, Eridu, Nippur. Later, Babylon. Each would leave its mark upon history. The birth of writing. Before writing existed, knowledge disappeared when people died. Stories survived only through memory. Laws changed from generation to generation. Business depended entirely upon trust. Then something remarkable happened. Ancient Mesopotamian scribes began pressing reed styluses into wet clay tablets. Simple marks became symbols. Symbols became language. Language became history. For the first time, human beings could preserve ideas for future generations. Thousands of clay tablets discovered by archaeologists still survive today. Some record taxes. Others describe trade. Some preserve poetry. Others contain astronomical observations. The written word changed civilization forever. Looking toward the sky. Night in ancient Mesopotamia was breathtaking. Far from modern city lights, the heavens appeared unimaginably bright. Millions of stars covered the sky. The Milky Way stretched overhead like a glowing river. Priests climbed temple towers called ziggurats to observe celestial movements. They carefully recorded the rising of planets, the changing phases of the moon, the appearance of eclipses, the movement of constellations across the seasons. In many ways, they became some of humanity's earliest astronomers. Yet despite studying creation so carefully, many confused creation with the Creator. Some believed stars possessed divine power. Others worshipped the moon. Others honored the sun. Knowledge alone does not always produce wisdom. The towering ziggurats. One of the most impressive structures in Mesopotamia was the ziggurat. Unlike Egypt's pyramids, which served mainly as royal tombs, ziggurats functioned as temple complexes. Layer upon layer of enormous brick platforms rose toward the heavens. Wide staircases climbed upward. Priests conducted religious ceremonies near the summit. From below, the buildings appeared almost to touch the sky. To ancient people, these towers represented humanity reaching toward the divine. But sometimes, people mistake impressive buildings for spiritual truth. Beautiful architecture cannot guarantee correct belief. The religion of many gods. Religion filled every part of Mesopotamian life. Nearly every city honored its own patron deity. Families kept household idols. Kings built temples. Farmers prayed before planting crops. Soldiers sought blessings before battle. Merchants offered sacrifices before beginning long journeys. Some worshipped the sun. Others worshipped the moon. Others believed rivers possessed spirits. Still others honored carved statues made by human hands. The irony was remarkable. Human beings created the idols, then bowed before them. How idols were made. Imagine entering an ancient workshop. Woodworkers carefully carved cedar into human shapes. Stone masons shaped limestone into elegant figures. Goldsmiths covered statues with precious metals. Artists painted eyes onto lifeless faces. When finished, these objects became sacred. People bowed before them, offered food, burned incense, whispered prayers. Yet each idol depended entirely upon human hands for its own existence. Without craftsmen, the gods themselves could not even stand upright. This contradiction would one day trouble a thoughtful young boy. Power and religion. Kings understood something important. Religion could strengthen political power. If the people believed the king ruled by divine authority, obedience became easier. Temples grew wealthier. Priests gained influence. Political authority and religious tradition often became closely connected. To question the gods was often seen as questioning the stability of society itself. This made reform extremely difficult. Anyone challenging false worship risked confronting not only religious leaders, but political rulers as well. Soon, one young man would do exactly that. The search hidden within every human heart. Despite thousands of gods, many thoughtful people continued asking deeper questions. Who created the rivers? Who placed the stars in the sky? Who gives life? And who takes it away? Can statues truly hear prayers? Can carved stone create rain? Can wood forgive sins? These questions quietly existed long before Ibrahim AS was born. The answers waited patiently. A family of idol makers. According to the Quran, Ibrahim's father called Azar was deeply connected with idol worship. Classical Islamic scholars generally describe him as an idol maker or one closely associated with the making and care of idols, though the Quran itself simply identifies him as a man devoted to idol worship. Imagine growing up surrounded by carved statues. Every room filled with images regarded as sacred. Customers arriving to purchase idols. Priests visiting regularly. Religion becoming not only belief, but livelihood. This was the world into which Ibrahim would be born. He did not arrive in a family already searching for truth. He arrived inside the very system he would one day challenge. The child history was waiting for. Some children enter history quietly. Others seem destined to change it. At first, no one recognized the significance of the newborn child. He cried like every other infant. He depended upon his mother. He learned to walk, to speak, to observe the world around him. Nothing outwardly distinguished him from thousands of other children growing up across Mesopotamia. Yet Allah had already chosen him. Long before kings knew his name. Before scholars debated his ideas. Before entire nations traced their spiritual heritage back to him. He belonged to Allah. His mission had already been written. The silence before the questions. As evening settled across Mesopotamia, the city slowly grew quiet. Oil lamps flickered inside brick homes. Temple fires glowed atop distant ziggurats. The Euphrates reflected thousands of stars. Priests continued their rituals. Merchants counted the day's earnings. Families gathered for evening meals. Everything appeared stable. Permanent. Certain. Yet history often changes not through armies, but through questions. And somewhere within this ancient world, a child was growing. A child who would soon look toward the heavens and ask the question that countless others had forgotten. Who is the true Lord of all this? That question would change the world forever. The birth of Ibrahim AS, the rise of a tyrant, and a city that reached for the sky. When history and revelation meet. As we continue our journey, it is important to pause for a moment and understand something unique about the story of Prophet Ibrahim AS. Unlike many modern biographies, the Quran is not arranged as a chronological history book. Instead, it reveals the moments that carry the greatest spiritual lessons. Because of this, there are many details about Ibrahim's early life that the Quran leaves unspoken. Over the centuries, Muslim scholars preserved explanations from authentic hadith, classical tafsir, and early historical writings. Jewish and Christian traditions also tell stories about Abraham's childhood. Some of these traditions agree with Islamic teachings. Others differ significantly. Throughout this series, we will carefully distinguish between what is firmly established by the Quran and authentic hadith, and what belongs to later historical or religious traditions. Our goal is not merely to tell an ancient story. Our goal is to understand the world into which Allah sent one of His greatest prophets. A civilization at its peak. By the time Ibrahim AS was born, Mesopotamia had become one of the most advanced regions on earth. Cities stretched across the fertile plains between the Tigris and Euphrates rivers. Thousands of farmers worked irrigated fields. Engineers dug canals that carried life-giving water across vast distances. Merchants traveled from distant lands carrying copper from Anatolia, timber from Lebanon, lapis lazuli from Afghanistan, and spices from Arabia. Every marketplace overflowed with activity. Languages from many tribes mixed together. Ideas traveled with caravans. Knowledge expanded. Yet despite remarkable progress, many hearts remained trapped in ancient superstition. Human beings had learned to read the stars. But many still worshipped them. The Great City. Among the cities of Mesopotamia, one name would become famous throughout history. Babylon. Its exact appearance during Ibrahim's lifetime remains a subject of historical discussion, and scholars differ regarding the precise city and era connected to his life. However, later Babylon became one of the greatest cities the ancient world had ever known. Massive defensive walls surrounded the city. Broad avenues connected busy marketplaces. Temples dominated the skyline. Towering ziggurats stood like artificial mountains reaching toward heaven. Travelers arriving for the first time often stood in amazement. Never before had they seen a city so vast. So organized. So confident. Babylon believed itself eternal. History would eventually prove otherwise. The shadow of a powerful ruler. Among the most famous figures associated with Ibrahim AS in Islamic tradition is a ruler often identified as Nimrod. The Quran does not mention his name directly. Instead, it speaks of a king who argued with Ibrahim about the power of Allah. Early Muslim historians and many classical scholars identify this ruler as Nimrod. Jewish traditions also associate Nimrod with Babylon and portray him as a mighty king. Because the Quran leaves his name unstated, we should distinguish carefully between revelation and historical tradition. What is certain is this. Ibrahim would one day stand before a ruler whose pride had become so great that he challenged the authority of Allah himself. Power without humility. History remembers many powerful rulers. Some used authority to protect their people. Others became consumed by pride. The king who opposed Ibrahim belonged to the second group. His wealth increased. His armies expanded. His influence spread across the land. People praised him. Servants obeyed him without question. Priests honored him. Over time, something dangerous happened. He no longer viewed himself simply as a king. According to Islamic tradition, he began claiming powers that belonged only to Allah. This has happened repeatedly throughout history. Power, when separated from humility, often begins demanding worship instead of service. The religion of fear. Many people imagine ancient religion as peaceful ceremonies beneath beautiful temples. The reality was often far more complicated. Religion and government were deeply connected. Temple priests advised kings. Kings financed temples. Festivals reinforced political authority. Citizens who questioned the official religion risked punishment. Belief became more than personal faith. It became a matter of loyalty to the state. Questioning idols could be interpreted as questioning the entire social order. Into this world, a prophet would soon be born. The night sky over Mesopotamia. Long before electric lights filled modern cities, the night sky possessed extraordinary beauty. As darkness covered the plains, countless stars emerged above the rivers. The Milky Way stretched from horizon to horizon. Planets appeared brighter than many people today have ever seen. Ancient astronomers carefully observed these lights. They recorded the movements of Venus, the changing phases of the moon, the yearly journey of the sun. Their observations were remarkably accurate. But somewhere along the way, observation became worship. Instead of asking, "Who created these lights?" many asked, "Which light should we worship?" Knowledge had advanced. Wisdom had not. The House of Azar. In one corner of this ancient civilization stood the home of Azar. The Quran introduces him simply as Ibrahim's father, devoted to idols. Classical Islamic scholars describe his close association with idol making and idol worship. Imagine entering his workshop. The smell of fresh cedar wood fills the air. Bronze tools lie neatly arranged upon wooden benches. Blocks of limestone wait beside unfinished statues. Some idols stand only half completed. Others have already been polished until they shine. Customers arrive throughout the day. Some request larger statues for temples. Others purchase smaller household idols. For Azar, this is more than craftsmanship. It is livelihood, family tradition, religious devotion. He cannot imagine life without these figures. Nor can he imagine that his own son will someday question everything they represent. The birth of a child. The exact date of Ibrahim's birth remains unknown. The Quran wisely leaves such details unmentioned. What matters is not the calendar. What matters is the mission. Somewhere within this land, a child entered the world. He arrived quietly. No armies celebrated. No kings recognized him. No priest announced his future. To the people around him, he appeared to be an ordinary infant. Only Allah knew what lay ahead. Throughout history, this pattern repeats itself. The greatest changes often begin unnoticed. A child born into an ordinary home may one day transform the world. Stories about his birth. Over the centuries, many fascinating stories developed regarding Ibrahim's birth. Some Jewish traditions describe astrologers warning a king that a child would one day challenge his authority. Some later Islamic historical works preserve similar reports. However, these stories are not mentioned in the Quran and are not established through authentic hadith. They may reflect ancient traditions preserved among earlier communities, but they should not be treated as certain historical fact. The Quran deliberately focuses on something more important. Not the dramatic circumstances of Ibrahim's birth, but the truth of his message. A curious child. As Ibrahim grew, he observed everything around him. The busy markets. The towering temples. The rivers flowing through fertile fields. The craftsmen carving idols. The priests offering sacrifices. Children naturally ask questions. Most eventually stop. Ibrahim did not. Every answer led to another question. Every explanation invited deeper thought. His mind searched beyond appearances. He was not satisfied with easy answers. He wanted truth, not tradition. The difference between inheriting and understanding. Most people inherit their beliefs from those around them. Parents teach children. Communities reinforce traditions. Few pause to ask why. There is nothing wrong with receiving wisdom from previous generations. But Ibrahim would teach humanity something profound. Inherited beliefs should still be examined with honesty. Truth does not fear questions. Only falsehood does. This lesson remains as relevant today as it was 4,000 years ago. The world awaits a voice. While Ibrahim grew into childhood, the world around him continued unchanged. Priests climbed the ziggurats before dawn. Kings issued commands. Farmers harvested grain. Merchants counted silver. Artisans carved idols from wood and stone. Everything appeared stable. Permanent. Unshakable. Yet history often stands upon foundations far more fragile than people imagine. Sometimes, one sincere voice is enough to challenge an empire. One thoughtful question is enough to expose centuries of error. And somewhere inside the house of Azar, that voice was growing stronger. The first questions. One evening, as the sun disappeared beyond the Euphrates River, young Ibrahim watched craftsmen carefully carrying newly completed idols toward a nearby temple. People bowed respectfully as the statues passed. Some kissed them. Others whispered prayers. The idols remained silent. Motionless. Dependent upon the very people who carried them. The child watched quietly. His eyes followed every movement. He said nothing. Not yet. But inside his heart, the first questions had already begun. How could something created by human hands become worthy of worship? How could stone hear prayers? How could wood answer cries for help? Those simple questions would soon shake the foundations of an entire civilization. The child who questioned the gods, the stars, the moon, and the search for the one true creator. The quiet mind of a future prophet. Some children are remembered for their strength. Others for their courage. Others for their extraordinary intelligence. But Ibrahim AS would be remembered for something even rarer. He refused to stop asking questions. Not questions born from rebellion. Not questions asked to embarrass others. But questions born from sincerity. He wanted truth. Nothing less. Every day he watched the world around him. He noticed details that others ignored. The same streets. The same temples. The same statues. The same rituals repeated day after day. Everyone else seemed satisfied. Ibrahim was not. Deep inside his heart, Allah had planted something that no idol could ever satisfy. A longing for the Creator himself. Growing up among idols. Imagine waking each morning in the house of Azar. Before breakfast, customers had already begun arriving. Some requested statues for newly built homes. Others ordered larger idols for temples. Craftsmen carefully measured blocks of stone. Woodworkers polished cedar until it shone. Goldsmiths covered carved faces with thin sheets of precious metal. The workshop remained busy from sunrise until evening. Finished idols lined the walls. Some stood taller than a man. Others were small enough to fit in the palm of a hand. People entered respectfully. They admired the statues. Paid for them. Then carried them away. To worship them. Young Ibrahim watched all of this in silence. He saw every step of the process. He knew exactly where the idols came from. He watched them begin as lifeless pieces of wood and stone. He watched human hands shape every detail. He watched artisans repair broken statues. He watched workers carry them from one place to another. One question quietly formed in his mind. If people create these gods, how can these gods create people? Questions few dared to ask. The society around Ibrahim had inherited centuries of tradition. Children rarely questioned their parents. Citizens rarely questioned priests. No one challenged the king. No one challenged the temples. To question the gods meant questioning the entire civilization. Many feared asking difficult questions. Not because they lacked intelligence, but because the consequences could be severe. It is often easier to follow tradition than to examine it. Yet every great reformer in history begins with one simple act. They look carefully. And they refuse to pretend. Watching nature. Ibrahim loved observing the natural world. He watched rivers flow endlessly toward distant lands. He saw seeds disappear beneath the soil before returning as green plants. He watched birds build nests with astonishing precision. He noticed how the seasons changed. The heat of summer. The cool winds of winter. The arrival of spring flowers. The harvest of autumn. Nothing happened without order. Nothing appeared random. Creation itself pointed toward intelligence. Toward purpose. Toward design. The universe resembled a carefully written book. Someone had authored it. The beauty of the ancient night. Then came the evenings. As darkness settled across Mesopotamia, the world transformed. Without artificial lights, the heavens revealed their full glory. The Milky Way stretched across the sky like a river of silver. Thousands upon thousands of stars shimmered above the desert. Bright planets slowly crossed the heavens. The moon illuminated rivers and temples alike. Ancient priests climbed their ziggurats to observe these celestial wonders. Many believed the stars ruled human destiny. Others worshipped the moon. Others honored the sun. To them, these heavenly bodies seemed worthy of divine reverence. Ibrahim also watched the heavens. But he watched them differently. The Quranic reflection begins. The Quran records one of the most remarkable moments in Ibrahim's life. It is found in Surah Al-An'am. The verses describe Ibrahim observing the heavens. Many scholars explain that Allah was teaching his people through Ibrahim's reasoning. Others explain that these verses represent Ibrahim engaging his people using arguments they could understand. What is important is this. The Quran does not teach that Ibrahim truly believed the star, moon, or sun were gods. Rather, he used careful reasoning to expose the weakness of false worship. The first star. One evening, a brilliant star appeared. Its light shone brightly against the dark sky. Ibrahim said, "This is my Lord." But when the star disappeared below the horizon, he said, "I do not like those that disappear." Imagine standing beside him, watching the star slowly sink into darkness. If something worthy of worship vanishes every night, can it truly be God? Can the Creator disappear? Can the Sustainer of the universe be absent even for a moment? The answer was becoming clear. Then came the moon. Later, the moon rose above the eastern horizon. Larger. Brighter. More majestic than the stars. Its silver light bathed the valleys below. Again, Ibrahim presented the argument. "This is my Lord." But before long, the moon also set. Its light faded. Darkness returned. Then Ibrahim declared, "If my Lord does not guide me, I will surely be among the people who have gone astray." The lesson deepened. Even something as magnificent as the moon cannot be divine if it depends upon laws established by another. It rises because it has been commanded to rise. It sets because it has been commanded to set. Obedient creation cannot itself be the creator. Finally, the sun. Morning arrived. The eastern horizon exploded with golden light. The sun rose above the plains of Mesopotamia. Nothing in the sky appeared greater. Its warmth awakened the earth. Its light illuminated cities, rivers, mountains, and fields. To many ancient civilizations, the sun seemed the obvious choice for worship. It gave life. Produced harvests. marked the passing of time. Surely, they thought, nothing greater exists. Ibrahim again spoke. This is my Lord. This is greater. But as evening approached, the sun also disappeared. The greatest object visible in the sky still obeyed a schedule. It rose. It moved. It set. It possessed neither independence nor eternal existence. Then Ibrahim declared words that continue echoing across history. Turning toward the Creator. The Quran records Ibrahim saying, "Indeed, I have turned my face toward He who created the heavens and the earth, inclining toward truth, and I am not among those who associate others with Allah." These words changed everything. Notice what Ibrahim did not say. He did not merely reject idols. He did not simply criticize tradition. He turned toward something infinitely greater. Toward the Creator of all things. The one who created stars. Without being a star. Who created the moon. Without needing the moon. Who created the sun. Without depending upon its light. The one who never rises. Never sets. Never sleeps. Never dies. The eternal Creator. Allah. A revolutionary idea. To modern readers, this conclusion may seem obvious. To Ibrahim's society, it was revolutionary. Entire economies depended upon temple worship. Political authority rested upon religious tradition. Priests built their lives around the worship of celestial bodies and idols. By declaring that the Creator existed beyond creation itself, Ibrahim challenged the intellectual foundation of his entire civilization. This was no small disagreement. It would eventually place him in direct conflict with his family, his community, and even the king himself. The difference between signs and the one who sends them. Ibrahim understood something many people still struggle to understand. Creation points toward the Creator. But creation is not the Creator. The stars inspire wonder. The moon inspires beauty. The sun gives warmth. None of these deserve worship. They are signs, not objects of devotion. Imagine reading a beautiful letter. You admire the handwriting, the paper, the ink. But eventually your attention moves beyond the page, toward the one who wrote it. Creation is like that letter. Its beauty invites us to know its author. The beginning of Tawhid. From this moment, Ibrahim's mission became clear. He would call humanity back to Tawhid. The worship of Allah alone without partners. This was not a new religion. It was the original message carried by every prophet before him. The message of Adam. The message of Nuh. The message of Hud. The message of Salih. One Creator. One Lord. One Sustainer. One God worthy of worship. History changes. Languages change. Empires rise and fall. But Tawhid remains unchanged. The silence before the storm. The people of Babylon did not yet realize what had begun. The temples still stood. The priests continued their rituals. The marketplaces remained crowded. The king ruled from his palace. Azar continued crafting idols. Life appeared perfectly ordinary. Yet somewhere within that great city, a young man had reached absolute certainty. He now knew the difference between the Creator and his creation. Soon, he would speak. And when he did, his words would shake one of the greatest civilizations on earth. The debate with Azar, a son's respectful call to the truth. The hardest conversation. There are many kinds of courage. The courage of a soldier entering battle. The courage of a sailor crossing an unknown sea. The courage of an explorer walking into an unmapped wilderness. But perhaps one of the most difficult forms of courage is speaking the truth to someone you deeply love. Especially when that person raised you, fed you, protected you, taught you your first words. For Ibrahim AS, the first great challenge of his mission would not come from a king. It would not come from priests. It would not come from angry crowds. It would begin inside his own home. With the man who had held him as a child. The man the Quran calls Azar. The house of statues. The morning sun poured through the doorway of Azar's workshop. Dust floated gently in the warm air. Rows of unfinished idols rested against the walls. Some were carved from cedar wood brought from distant forests. Others had been shaped from smooth limestone taken from nearby quarries. Several bronze figures stood upon wooden tables waiting to be polished. The rhythmic sound of chisels echoed throughout the room. Tap. 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 Customers entered one after another. One ordered a household idol for protection. Another requested a larger statue for a newly built shrine. A wealthy merchant commissioned a beautifully decorated figure covered with gold leaf. To everyone else, this was an ordinary business. To Ibrahim, it had become impossible to ignore. He had watched these statues being created. He had seen the first rough block of stone. The careful carving. The polishing. The painting of the eyes. He knew exactly how they came into existence. And because he knew, he could never convince himself that they were gods. Respect before correction. The Quran preserves one of the most beautiful conversations between a parent and a child ever recorded. It appears in Surah Maryam. Notice something remarkable. Although Ibrahim completely rejected his father's beliefs, he never abandoned respect. Again and again he begins with the words, "Oh my dear father." In Arabic. Ya Ibadi. Not once. Not twice. But repeatedly. His language remained gentle. His voice remained calm. His heart remained full of compassion. This teaches an extraordinary lesson. Truth does not require harshness. Conviction does not require cruelty. A believer can firmly reject falsehood while treating people with dignity. The first question. Imagine the workshop growing quiet as Ibrahim approaches his father. Azar looks up from his work. The chisel rests upon the table. For a moment, only silence remains. Then Ibrahim speaks. His words are simple, respectful, yet powerful enough to echo through history. "Oh my dear father, why do you worship that which neither hears, nor sees, nor can benefit you in any way?" What an extraordinary question. He does not begin with accusations. He does not insult his father. He simply asks him to think. Can these statues hear your prayers? Can they answer your fears? Can they help themselves? If not, why worship them? The wisdom of questions. Great teachers often ask questions instead of delivering lectures. Questions invite reflection. They allow people to discover truth for themselves. Ibrahim understood this. He could have shouted. He could have condemned. Instead, he gently invited his father to examine reality. The idols remained silent. They never answered. Not because they chose silence. Because they could not speak. Knowledge comes from Allah. Ibrahim continued. The Quran records his words. "Oh my dear father, indeed there has come to me knowledge that has not come to you. So follow me, I will guide you to a straight path." Notice his humility. He does not claim personal superiority. He does not say, "I am smarter than you." He says that knowledge has come to him. Knowledge is a gift from Allah, not a reason for arrogance. The more a person truly knows, the more humble they become. The danger behind the idols. Then Ibrahim gently revealed something even deeper. He said, "O my dear father, do not worship Satan. Indeed, Satan has always been rebellious against the Most Merciful." At first this may seem surprising. After all, the people were worshipping statues, not Satan directly. But Ibrahim understood an important reality. False worship ultimately serves the goals of Satan. Every act that turns human beings away from their Creator strengthens deception. The statues themselves possessed no power, but the false ideas surrounding them led people away from Allah. Compassion, not anger. Perhaps the most touching words come next. Ibrahim says, "O my dear father, I fear that a punishment from the Most Merciful may touch you, and you would become a companion of Satan." Notice what he does not say. He does not say, "I hope you are punished." He says, "I fear for you." His concern is genuine. He wants his father to be saved. Every prophet desired guidance for their people, not destruction. Even when rejected, even when mocked, their hearts remained filled with mercy. Azar's response. Sadly, Azar did not accept his son's invitation. Instead, the Quran records his sharp reply. "Do you reject my gods, O Ibrahim?" For Azar, this was no longer about evidence. It had become personal. His son was challenging everything he had believed throughout his life. His profession, his traditions, his reputation, his understanding of the world. Sometimes people reject truth not because it lacks evidence, but because accepting it would require rebuilding their entire identity. A father's threat. Azar's anger continued to grow. Finally, he declared, "If you do not stop, I will surely stone you. Leave me for a long time." Imagine hearing those words from your own father. The man who once carried you in his arms now threatens to drive you away. How heartbreaking that moment must have been. Yet Ibrahim remained calm. He answered neither insult with insult, nor anger with anger. The reply that teaches every generation. The Quran preserves Ibrahim's remarkable response. "Peace be upon you. I will ask my Lord to forgive you. Indeed, He has always been gracious to me." What extraordinary dignity. He leaves without hatred, without revenge, without raising his voice. He still hopes for his father's guidance. He still promises to pray for him. This is prophetic character. Strength wrapped in kindness. Truth delivered with mercy. Leaving home. Every journey begins with a single step. For Ibrahim, that step led away from his childhood home. Imagine him walking through the streets of Babylon as evening approaches. The setting sun paints the city walls with golden light. Behind him, the familiar sounds of his father's workshop slowly fade. Ahead lies uncertainty. No home. No guarantee of safety. Only trust in Allah. Sometimes faith asks us to leave behind what feels comfortable. Not because comfort is evil, but because truth is greater. A lonely road. As darkness settles over the city, Ibrahim walks alone. Temple bells echo in the distance. Smoke rises from incense offered to countless idols. Priests continue their rituals atop the great ziggurats. Merchants close their shops. Families gather for evening meals. Life continues as though nothing has changed. Yet history has changed. One young man now stands apart from an entire civilization. Not because he seeks isolation, but because he refuses to compromise the truth. The cost of conviction. History often celebrates heroes after their victories. But rarely do we pause to consider the loneliness that comes before them. At this moment, Ibrahim possesses no followers. No large community. No worldly power. No army. No kingdom. Only certainty. And sometimes, one heart completely devoted to Allah is stronger than an empire filled with doubt. The city watches. News spreads quickly. The son of Azar has rejected the gods. He refuses to bow before the idols. He claims there is only one Lord. People begin whispering in marketplaces. Priests grow concerned. The elders shake their heads. The king's advisors quietly take notice. For now, it is only conversation. Only whispers. But whispers have a way of becoming storms. And the greatest confrontation of Ibrahim's life is drawing near. The lesson of the family. The Quran does not hide the pain of family disagreements. Instead, it teaches us how to face them. Respect does not require agreeing with falsehood. Love does not require abandoning truth. Patience does not require silence when guidance is needed. Ibrahim honored his father as a parent. But he never honored false worship. He separated compassion for the person from acceptance of the error. That balance remains one of the greatest lessons in the Quran. The night before the turning point. The moon rises over Babylon. Its pale light reflects upon the Euphrates. The towering ziggurats stand silent beneath the stars. Inside the temples, the idols remain exactly where they have always stood. Motionless. Silent. Dependent upon human hands. But somewhere beyond the city, a prophet kneels in prayer. His heart belongs entirely to Allah. And soon, he will perform an act so bold that every idol in Babylon will become a witness to its own helplessness. The festival, the empty city, and the day Ibrahim AS broke the idols. The morning before history changed. Every civilization has moments that seem ordinary while they are happening. A market opens. Children run through dusty streets. Priests climb temple stairs. Merchants unlock wooden doors. The sun rises just as it had thousands of times before. No one imagines that by sunset, history will never be the same again. Babylon awoke to such a morning. The first rays of sunlight spread across the Euphrates River. The great ziggurats cast long shadows over the city. Smoke drifted upward from bakeries preparing fresh bread. Caravans loaded with wool, copper, and spices gathered outside the eastern gate. Musicians tuned their instruments. The city was preparing for one of its great religious festivals. Laughter echoed through the streets. Families dressed in their finest garments. Children waited excitedly for the celebrations to begin. To everyone else, it was a day of joy. To Ibrahim AS, it was the day Allah had prepared for a lesson that would echo across thousands of years. The festival outside the city. Classical Islamic commentators describe that the people of Babylon would leave the city during one of their religious celebrations, gathering outside for ceremonies, feasting, and rituals connected to their idols. The Quran itself does not describe every detail of the festival. It simply records the events that followed. Whether the gathering lasted one day or longer, the important point remains the same. For a brief period, most of the city would be empty. Only the temples and their silent statues would remain. Allah had opened a door. What happened next would expose the weakness of every false god. An invitation refused. As neighbors prepared to leave, they invited Ibrahim to join them. Come with us. There will be food. There will be music. The gods will bless our gathering. But Ibrahim had already turned his heart completely toward Allah. The Quran records that he responded in a way that caused them to leave without him. He said, "Indeed, I am unwell." Scholars have explained this statement in different ways. Many understood it to mean that Ibrahim was sick at heart because of his people's idolatry. Others explained that he intended to remain behind for a purpose known only to Allah. The Quran focuses not on the wording, but on what came next. The people departed. The city slowly emptied. Silence settled over Babylon. The empty streets. Imagine walking through Babylon now. The crowded markets have grown quiet. Doors remain closed. The great avenues that were full of merchants only hours earlier now lie almost deserted. The sound of celebration comes faintly from beyond the city walls. Only the wind moves between the towering buildings. The Euphrates flows peacefully beside the city. Even the birds seem quieter than usual. The idols remain inside their temple. Waiting. Unmoving. Silent. For the first time. No worshippers surround them. No priests guard them. No incense burns before them. Only one man walks toward them. The temple of many gods. The temple stood at the heart of the city. Massive stone columns supported its roof. Colorful banners hung from the walls. Golden lamps flickered softly inside. The air smelled of incense and cedar. Rows upon rows of idols filled the great hall. Some were carved from polished stone. Others were cast in bronze. Some wore crowns decorated with jewels. Others held carved staffs or symbols of power. Offerings of fruit, grain, and bread rested before them. The people believed these statues protected the city. Brought rain. Blessed harvests. Healed the sick. Granted victory in war. Yet none of them had ever spoken. None had ever moved. None had ever accepted a single offering with their own hands. One man before hundreds of idols. Ibrahim entered slowly. His footsteps echoed through the enormous chamber. He looked carefully at every statue. Large. Small. Simple. Magnificent. Each had been shaped by human hands. Each depended upon human care. Each represented the imagination of its creator rather than the creator himself. He paused before the offerings. Fresh fruit. Bread. Bowls of grain. According to classical tafsir, Ibrahim spoke words that exposed the absurdity of idol worship. Why do you not eat? No answer came. He asked again. Why do you not speak? Only silence filled the temple. The silence itself became evidence. The axe. Against one of the walls rested a heavy axe. Perhaps it had been used by temple workers. Perhaps by craftsmen maintaining the statues. The Quran does not explain where it came from. It simply records what Ibrahim did. He lifted it. Not with anger. Not with hatred. But with complete certainty. Every falsehood eventually meets truth. Every illusion eventually meets reality. The sound that echoed through Babylon. The first strike shattered the silence. Stone cracked. Fragments fell across the temple floor. The echo rolled through the empty hall. Then came another blow. And another. One by one. The idols collapsed. Heads rolled across the polished floor. Arms broke away from lifeless bodies. golden decorations scattered like leaves in the wind. The gods who supposedly controlled the universe could not protect themselves from a single man. No lightning struck. No statue defended another. No miracle appeared. Only broken stone remained. One idol left standing. Yet Ibrahim did something unexpected. He did not destroy every statue. The Quran tells us. He reduced them to fragments, except for the largest one, so that they might return to it. Why? Because the lesson had not yet reached its climax. The greatest idol remained standing. Around it, the temple lay in ruins. Broken faces. Broken hands. Broken crowns. Broken pride. Then Ibrahim placed the axe upon, or according to many scholars, with the largest idol. The message required no explanation. It would invite the people to think. The wisdom behind the act. Notice what Ibrahim accomplished. He did not ask the people to accept a philosophical argument. He created a question that only they could answer. If the largest idol truly possessed power, why had it allowed every other idol to be destroyed? If it defended the city, why had it not defended its own companions? If it deserved worship, why had it remained completely helpless? Sometimes the strongest argument is not spoken. It is revealed. The return. As evening approached, the festival ended. Families laughed as they returned toward Babylon. Children carried flowers. Musicians packed their instruments. Merchants discussed the day's celebrations. No one suspected what awaited them. Smoke rose peacefully from cooking fires. The setting sun painted the temples in deep shades of crimson. Everything appeared normal. Until someone entered the sanctuary. A scream shattered the evening. People rushed toward the temple. Priests ran through the streets. The city gathered at the entrance. Then they saw it. The once magnificent hall had become a field of shattered stone. Broken idols covered the floor. Only the largest statue still stood. The axe rested beside it. Silence spread through the crowd. Shock turned into outrage. Then someone cried out. Who has done this to our gods? Surely he is among the wrongdoers. A familiar name. For a moment, no one answered. Then someone remembered. There is a young man. We heard him speaking against the idols. They call him Ibrahim. The name spread quickly through the crowd. Ibrahim. The son of Azar. The one who rejected our gods. Within minutes, the entire city knew. The young man who had questioned the idols had now challenged an entire civilization. The priests demanded his arrest. The elders demanded justice. The news reached the palace. Soon, even the king would hear. The calm before the trial. As night covered Babylon, the broken idols remained scattered across the temple floor. The largest statue still stood exactly where Ibrahim had left it. Silent. Motionless. Powerless. Outside, torches illuminated the streets. Soldiers searched for the young prophet. Crowds whispered in every marketplace. No one slept easily. Tomorrow, Babylon would place Ibrahim AS on trial. But the true question was no longer whether Ibrahim could defend himself. The true question was this. Could the gods defend themselves? A city without sleep. Babylon did not sleep that night. The streets remained alive long after darkness had settled across the valley. Torches burned beside every major road. Temple priests hurried between shrines. Messengers rode on horseback toward the royal palace. Merchants abandoned their evening meals to discuss the unbelievable news. Families gathered around oil lamps. Every conversation seemed to begin with the same question. Have you heard? The idols have been destroyed. The temple has been attacked. The son of Azar has done it. The city that usually celebrated its gods now whispered in fear about them. Not because the idols had spoken. Not because they had defended themselves. But because they had remained completely helpless. For the first time in generations, many people quietly wondered what they had never dared to ask before. Inside the temple. As dawn approached, priests entered the temple once again. The sight before them remained unchanged. Broken heads lay scattered across the polished stone floor. Arms that once held ceremonial staffs now rested in pieces. Golden ornaments had fallen into the dust. Fruit offered the previous day had begun to spoil. The smell of incense lingered faintly in the cool morning air. At the far end of the chamber, the largest idol still stood. Motionless. Its carved face remained expressionless. The heavy axe rested beside it. If anyone had entered the temple without knowing what had happened, the scene itself seemed almost to accuse the great statue. But everyone knew the truth. The idol had done nothing. Because it could do nothing. The arrest of Ibrahim AS. Word reached the palace before sunrise. The rulers understood immediately that this was no ordinary act of vandalism. This was an attack upon the foundations of their civilization. Religion. Politics. Economics. Tradition. Everything had been challenged. Soldiers received their orders. They searched the streets. The riverbanks. The outskirts of the city. Eventually, they found Ibrahim AS. The Quran gives no description of resistance. No struggle. No attempt to escape. He walked calmly. A prophet who places his trust in Allah does not measure safety by circumstances. His heart remains steady even when surrounded by danger. The public assembly. The leaders of Babylon made an important decision. This trial would not happen in secret. The people had witnessed the destruction of the idols. Now the people would witness the punishment of the man responsible. Messengers spread throughout the city. Everyone was called to gather. The Quran records their intention. They wanted the people to become witnesses. Imagine thousands gathering in an open square. Temple priests wearing ceremonial robes. Government officials seated near the front. Merchants standing shoulder to shoulder. Farmers arriving from surrounding fields. Children climbing walls to see above the crowd. The entire city waited. In the center, one man stood alone. The accusation. The silence finally broke. The elders looked toward Ibrahim. One of them spoke. Are you the one who did this to our gods, O Ibrahim? The question echoed across the square. Thousands waited for his answer. He could have denied it. He could have remained silent. He could have pleaded for mercy. Instead, he answered with wisdom that has been remembered for thousands of years. The answer that changed history. The Quran records Ibrahim's response. Rather, this the largest of them did it. So ask them, if they are able to speak. At first glance, some readers misunderstand these words. Was Ibrahim claiming that the idol literally destroyed the others? No. His statement exposed the contradiction in their beliefs. If they truly believed the largest idol possessed divine power, then why not ask it? If it could answer prayers, surely it could answer a simple question. If it ruled the universe, surely it could explain what happened inside its own temple. The challenge was brilliant. It forced the people to confront their own assumptions. The moment of honest reflection. Then something extraordinary happened. For a brief moment, the crowd became silent. The Quran tells us. So they turned to one another and said, "Indeed, you yourselves are the wrongdoers." Imagine that moment. Priests looking at one another. Merchants lowering their eyes. Citizens realizing the obvious truth. The idols had never spoken. Never moved. Never defended themselves. The people knew it. Deep inside. They had always known it. Sometimes truth arrives quietly. Not through miracles. But through undeniable logic. The return to pride. Yet the moment did not last. The Quran continues. Then they reverted to their old ways and said, "You already know these cannot speak." There it was. The admission. You already know they cannot speak. With those words, they unknowingly destroyed their own argument. If the idols cannot speak, why pray to them? If they cannot answer questions, why ask them for blessings? If they cannot protect themselves, why expect them to protect anyone else? Ibrahim gently pointed out the contradiction. The question that echoes across time. The Quran records Ibrahim saying, "Then do you worship instead of Allah that which cannot benefit you at all or harm you?" What a timeless question. Not only for Babylon. For every generation. Every object of false devotion shares the same weakness. It cannot hear. It cannot answer. It cannot create. It cannot forgive. It cannot control life or death. Only Allah possesses those qualities. Everything else depends upon Him. A civilization confronted. For perhaps the first time in Babylon's history, its religious leaders possessed no convincing answer. Logic favored Ibrahim. Reality favored Ibrahim. Even the crowd had briefly admitted it. Yet history teaches us something sobering. Evidence alone does not guarantee acceptance. The greatest obstacle to truth is often not ignorance. It is pride. Pride whispers, "If I admit he is right, everything I have built will collapse." And so, many choose comfort over truth. The anger of the priests. The temple priests realized they were losing the argument. The crowd had begun thinking. Questions spread from one person to another. The priests could not allow doubt to grow. When reason fails, those who fear the truth often turn to force. Voices rose. Accusations filled the square. Some shouted that Ibrahim was insulting the gods. Others demanded severe punishment. The discussion was no longer about evidence. It had become about preserving authority. The king's decision. News of the public debate reached the ruler. The man whom Islamic tradition identifies as Nimrod understood that this conflict had become larger than one destroyed temple. If Ibrahim continued speaking, others might begin asking the same questions. Temples could lose influence. Priests could lose authority. The king himself might lose the religious foundation upon which his rule depended. A decision had to be made. Not merely against Ibrahim, but against the ideas he represented. The sentence would not be imprisonment. It would become one of history's most famous executions. Or so they believed.
Gathering the firewood. The order spread quickly across Babylon. Every family was commanded to contribute firewood. Children gathered fallen branches. Farmers brought wagon loads of timber. Carpenters donated cut lumber. Days passed. Then weeks. The pile continued growing. It became so enormous that travelers approaching Babylon could see it from miles away. Classical Islamic narrations describe it as unlike any fire the people had ever prepared. Whether every detail of these descriptions is historically certain or not, the central point remains. The people intended to create a fire so intense that no human being could survive. They believed they were preparing the end of Ibrahim. They did not realize Allah had already prepared something far greater.
The night before the fire. As darkness settled over Babylon, the enormous pile of wood stood outside the city like a man-made mountain. Workers made final preparations. Priests offered prayers to their idols. The crowd anticipated a spectacle unlike anything they had ever witnessed. Some expected the gods to demonstrate their power. Others simply wished to see the young prophet punished. Meanwhile, Ibrahim AS remained calm. No panic. No despair. No bargaining. His trust rested not in circumstances, but in Allah. Because a believer knows something the world often forgets. The Creator controls the fire, not the flames themselves.
The mountain of wood. By the time the preparations were complete, the people of Babylon had created something unlike anything their city had ever seen. For days, then weeks, wood had poured into the valley from every direction. Farmers brought dried palm trunks. Carpenters donated cedar beams. Shepherds gathered thorn bushes from the surrounding hills. Children carried small bundles of branches. The wealthy contributed wagon loads of timber. The poor offered whatever they could find. Each person believed they were defending the honor of their gods. The pile grew so high that it resembled a small hill. Travelers approaching Babylon from miles away could already see it rising above the plain. No ordinary execution required such preparation. This was intended to become a warning for every person who dared question the religion of the kingdom.
The furnace of Babylon. Workers carefully arranged the wood. Air passages were left beneath the pile to increase the heat. Dry brush filled every empty space. Pitch and oil were poured over the timber. When everything was finally ready, the priests gathered around it. Ceremonial prayers filled the air. Incense drifted toward the sky. The king watched from a raised platform. Thousands of citizens surrounded the valley. Some climbed nearby hills for a better view. Others stood upon rooftops overlooking the enormous pyre. No one wanted to miss what they believed would become the triumph of their gods. Then, the order was given. The fire awakens. One torch touched the dry brush. Another followed. Within moments, flames raced through the enormous pile. The sound alone was terrifying. Wood cracked. Branches exploded. Columns of fire twisted upward into the sky. Heat spread across the valley with astonishing force. Birds fled into the distance. Animals ran from nearby fields. The air shimmered violently above the flames. Smoke climbed toward the heavens like a dark mountain. Ancient reports described the blaze becoming so intense that people could not approach it closely. Whether every detail of those reports can be historically verified or not, one thing is certain from the Quranic account. The fire was meant to be overwhelming. Its purpose was absolute destruction. The people wanted certainty. They wanted no possibility of survival.
A problem no one expected. As the flames intensified, another problem emerged. The fire had become so hot that no one could safely bring Ibrahim close enough to throw him into it. Every attempt failed. The heat forced everyone backward. The very punishment they had created had become impossible to carry out. Classical Islamic historians describe that the people built a large catapult to launch Ibrahim into the center of the flames. The Quran itself does not mention the catapult. It simply tells us that the people cast him into the fire. The exact method remains part of historical tradition rather than revealed scripture. But whether by catapult or another means, their intention remained unchanged. They wanted him consumed completely. A prophet without fear. Imagine Ibrahim at that moment, bound before thousands of people. The roar of the flames filling the valley. Smoke darkening the afternoon sky. Priests shouting. Soldiers watching carefully. The king observing from his throne. Every earthly reason suggested that death was only moments away. Yet the Quran records no panic. No pleading, no bargaining, no despair. His heart belonged entirely to Allah. This is one of the defining qualities of the prophets. Their certainty does not come from favorable circumstances. It comes from knowing the one who controls every circumstance. the trust that cannot be broken. Classical Islamic narrations preserve a powerful statement associated with this moment. As Ibrahim was about to be cast into the fire, he is reported to have placed his complete trust in Allah, saying, Hasbunallahu wa ni'mal wakeel. Allah is sufficient for us, and He is the best disposer of affairs. This phrase later became beloved among Muslims throughout history. People have repeated it during wars, during illness, during hardship, during uncertainty. Not because it removes every difficulty immediately, but because it reminds the believer where true security is found. The heavens watch. Imagine the valley from above. Thousands of human beings gather below. The fire blazes brighter than anything they have ever created. The king believes his authority is secure. The priests believe their religion will prevail. The crowd believes the prophet's story is about to end. But above them, Allah, the Lord of all creation, is fully aware of every moment. No flame burns independently. No spark moves without His permission. The fire itself remains His creation. It obeys Him completely. The miracle. Then came one of the most beautiful commands recorded in the Quran. Allah said, O fire, be coolness and peace upon Ibrahim. Surah Al-Anbiya 21 hours 69 minutes. Notice the wording carefully. Allah did not extinguish the fire. He spoke to it. The one who created the laws of nature, commanded nature itself. Fire normally burns because Allah allows it to burn. When Allah wills otherwise, its nature changes. The flames remained. The heat disappeared. The danger vanished. The miracle was not that Ibrahim escaped the fire. The miracle was that the fire itself became an instrument of Allah's mercy. Inside the flames, imagine what the people expected to see. Smoke, screams, destruction. Instead, something impossible unfolded. Within the heart of the blazing furnace, Ibrahim remained safe. The fire that should have consumed him surrounded him without causing harm. Classical Islamic scholars describe that the flames became cool and peaceful. Some narrations mention that only the ropes binding him were burned away. These details come through later reports and should be understood as part of Islamic scholarly tradition. What the Quran makes absolutely clear is this: Allah protected His prophet completely, not because fire had become weak, but because its creator commanded it. The crowd falls silent. At first, no one understood what had happened. The flames still towered into the sky. The fire still roared. The smoke still climbed upward. Everything appeared normal, except for one impossible reality. Ibrahim was alive. No cries of pain echoed from the fire. No signs of suffering appeared. The crowd stared in disbelief. Priests whispered among themselves. Soldiers looked toward the king. Parents held their children close. Fear spread through Babylon. Not fear of Ibrahim. Fear of the one who had protected him. The defeat of false power. The Quran summarizes the outcome with remarkable simplicity. They intended to harm him, but we made them the greatest losers. Surah Al-Anbiya 21 hours 70 minutes. Notice what Allah does not say. He does not merely say that their plan failed. He says they became the losers. Everything they intended was reversed. They wanted to destroy the prophet. Instead, his message became stronger. They wanted to defend the idols. Instead, their helplessness became even more obvious. They wanted to demonstrate power. Instead, their weakness stood exposed before the entire nation. The lesson beyond the miracle. Many people focus only on the miracle itself. Certainly, it is one of the greatest miracles ever granted to a prophet. But beneath the miracle lies an even deeper lesson. Nature is not independent. The sun rises because Allah commands it. The rivers flow because Allah permits them. Seeds grow because Allah gives them life. Fire burns because Allah created it with that ability. Science helps us understand how Allah's creation usually functions. Miracles remind us who created those laws in the first place. The Creator is never imprisoned by His own creation. A city that could not explain what it saw. How do you explain a man walking safely through flames? The priests had no answer. The philosophers had no answer. The king had no answer. The idols had no answer. Only Ibrahim possessed the explanation. Oh, not chance. Not magic. Not illusion. The Lord of the heavens and the earth had protected His messenger. The evidence now stood before the entire city. Yet history teaches us that miracles alone do not force belief. A heart determined to reject truth can explain away almost anything. After the fire, when the flames finally subsided, Ibrahim emerged, alive, unharmed, calm. The same man who had entered the trial now stood before Babylon once again. The difference was not in him. The difference was in what everyone else had witnessed. The people could no longer say they had never seen a sign. They had seen one with their own eyes. The question now became, would they humble themselves before the truth? Or would pride once again blind their hearts? The beginning of a new journey. The miracle did not mark the end of Ibrahim's mission. It marked the beginning of something far greater. His message would no longer remain confined to one city. Allah had prepared a journey that would carry His prophet across deserts, into new lands, toward new nations, and eventually, to the valley that would become Mecca. But before those journeys could begin, there remained one final confrontation, a conversation with the ruler whose pride had challenged the Lord of the worlds, the debate between a king and a prophet, between worldly power and eternal truth, the debate with the tyrant king. When a prophet silenced an empire after the miracle, the valley slowly emptied. The towering flames had faded into smoking embers. The smell of burnt cedar still drifted through the air. People returned to Babylon carrying stories that sounded impossible. I saw him standing inside the fire. The flames surrounded him. He walked out alive. No ordinary man could survive. By sunset, every marketplace buzzed with rumors. Some whispered that Ibrahim AS possessed powerful magic. Others insisted that the gods had spared him. A few quietly wondered if the young prophet had been telling the truth all along. The miracle had shaken the city, but it had not yet changed its heart. The palace of the king. At the highest point of Babylon stood the royal palace. Its walls were built from baked bricks decorated with brilliant blue glaze. Bronze gates guarded the entrance. Tall columns supported vast reception halls. Soldiers in polished armor stood motionless along the corridors. Courtiers hurried between chambers carrying scrolls and royal decrees. The throne room itself reflected earthly power. Carved lions decorated the walls. Golden lamps illuminated polished stone floors. Incense burned continuously before the royal seat. Everything had been designed to inspire awe. Visitors entered believing they stood before the most powerful man on earth. Yet no palace, no matter how magnificent, can protect its ruler from the truth. A king worshipped by men. The Quran introduces this ruler without naming him. Islamic tradition commonly identifies him as Nimrod. Whether every historical detail associated with Nimrod can be verified is uncertain, but the Quran clearly describes a king whose pride had become extraordinary. Power has a strange effect on the human heart. At first, a ruler commands an army. Then he commands a nation. Eventually, if pride goes unchecked, he begins imagining that he commands reality itself. The king had grown accustomed to absolute obedience. When he spoke, people obeyed. When he judged, people accepted. When he ordered, people acted. Years of unquestioned authority had slowly convinced him that nothing stood above his will. Except, there was one he could never control. Awe. The summons. After the miracle of the fire, Ibrahim AS could no longer be ignored. The king ordered that he be brought before the throne. Imagine walking through the palace. Massive doors opened one after another. Guards watched silently. Nobles whispered among themselves. Priests observed carefully from the edges of the hall. At the center, upon an elevated throne, sat the ruler. His crown glittered beneath the light. His robes flowed across polished stone. Everything about the room proclaimed authority. Everything except the calm figure standing before him. A prophet does not measure greatness by crowns. He measures it by closeness to Allah. The Quranic debate begins. The Quran records this remarkable conversation in Surah Al-Baqarah 2:258. It begins simply. Have you not considered the one who argued with Ibrahim about his Lord because Allah had given him kingship? Notice the reason. The king argued because Allah had given him power. Power itself was not the problem. Pride was. He mistook Allah's gift for personal greatness, who gives life and death. Ibrahim spoke with complete confidence. He declared, "My Lord is the one who gives life and causes death." This statement reaches far beyond physical birth and dying. Allah creates every living soul. Every heartbeat, every breath, every moment of existence belongs to him. Life is his gift. Death occurs by his decree. Nothing escapes his knowledge. The king's reply. The ruler smiled. Perhaps he believed the young prophet had made an easy argument to defeat. He replied, "I also give life and cause death." What did he mean? Classical Muslim scholars explain that the king ordered 2 prisoners to be brought before him. One prisoner was sentenced to execution. The other was released. The king pointed toward them. "See, I allowed one to live. I caused the other to die." To those unfamiliar with deeper reasoning, the answer may have sounded impressive, but it completely missed Ibrahim's point. Releasing a prisoner is not creating life. Executing someone is not creating death in the divine sense. The king controlled legal judgments. He did not create existence. The difference between authority and creation. Imagine the difference. A gardener waters a tree. He helps it grow. But he did not create the seed. A physician treats a patient. She helps restore health. But she did not create the human body. Parents care for children. Teachers educate students. Leaders govern nations. All of these are important responsibilities. Yet none of them create life itself. Only Allah creates from nothing. Only Allah determines the beginning and end of every soul. The king had confused limited authority with divine power. The final argument. Seeing that the ruler had deliberately twisted the meaning, Ibrahim presented an argument no one could evade. The Quran records his words. Indeed, Allah brings the sun from the east, so bring it from the west. Silence. No lengthy explanation. No complicated philosophy. One sentence. One challenge. If you truly possess divine authority, command the sun. Change its path. Reverse its rising. Make tomorrow different. The court fell completely still. The silence of the palace. Imagine the throne room. Every eye turned toward the king. Priests waited. Soldiers stood motionless. Nobles held their breath. The ruler searched for an answer. None came. He could command armies. He could build cities. He could imprison men. But he could not command the sunrise. The next morning, the sun would rise exactly where Allah had ordained. Not because the king permitted it, because Allah commanded it. The Quran's powerful conclusion. The Quran summarizes the debate with breathtaking simplicity. So the one who disbelieved was utterly confounded. And Allah does not guide the wrongdoing people. The king was not defeated by military force. He was defeated by truth. No sword was drawn. No battle was fought. Only reason. Only revelation. Only reality. Sometimes. The strongest victory comes through words spoken with sincerity. Why didn't the king believe? Many readers wonder. If the argument was so clear, why did the king refuse? Because evidence alone cannot overcome arrogance. History repeats this lesson again and again. Pharaoh witnessed miracles. The people of the mud saw the miraculous she-camel. The people of Nuh heard warnings for centuries. The people of Babylon saw Ibrahim survive the fire. Still, many refused. The problem was never a lack of signs. It was the unwillingness to surrender pride. A lesson for every generation. The debate between Ibrahim and the king still speaks to us today. Every age has its own idols. Some worship wealth. Some worship power. Some worship fame. Some worship human achievement. None of these things are evil by themselves. But when they replace Allah in the human heart, they become idols of another kind. Ibrahim reminds us that everything in creation depends upon its creator, no matter how advanced civilization becomes. The sun still rises only because Allah wills it. The end of Babylon's opportunity. The people of Babylon had now witnessed three extraordinary events. They heard Ibrahim's arguments. They saw the idols destroyed. They witnessed the miracle of the fire. They watched the king lose the debate. Their opportunities had become countless. Yet most remained attached to the beliefs they had inherited. History often remembers civilizations for their buildings. Allah remembers them for their response to truth. A journey begins. The time had come for Ibrahim AS to leave. His mission would no longer remain inside Babylon. Allah had prepared another road, another land, another chapter in history. Ibrahim would begin one of the greatest migrations ever undertaken by a prophet. He would leave behind his birthplace, his family, his memories, his homeland, not in search of wealth, not in search of power, but in search of a place where the worship of Allah alone could flourish. That journey would eventually lead to Canaan, to Egypt, to the barren valley of Mecca, and to a legacy that would shape the lives of billions of people. The quiet departure. As evening settled across Babylon, Ibrahim stood one last time beside the Euphrates River. The waters flowed as they always had. The temple tower still rose above the city. The palace remained magnificent. The idols still occupied their shrines. Outwardly, nothing seemed to have changed. Yet everything had changed. Because somewhere within Babylon, the truth had been spoken clearly. Whether people accepted it or not, the message had been delivered. And a prophet's duty is to convey the truth faithfully. The guidance of hearts belongs to Allah alone. The road that changed history. There are moments in history when a single journey reshapes the future. A traveler packs only what he can carry. He says farewell to familiar streets. He walks away from everything he has ever known. At that moment, it appears to be only one family leaving one city. Years later, historians recognize it as the beginning of an entirely new chapter of civilization. For Ibrahim AS, the road out of Babylon would become such a journey. It was not simply a migration. It was an act of worship. An act of complete trust in Allah. A city left behind. Before dawn, Babylon rested beneath a blanket of silence. The massive walls that had once seemed eternal glowed faintly beneath the last stars of the night. The Euphrates River flowed steadily through the heart of the city. Temple towers still rose toward the heavens. Their priests would soon awaken to begin another day of rituals. Merchants would once again open their stalls. Children would laugh in the streets. The king would sit upon his throne. Life inside Babylon would continue almost exactly as it had before. Yet one thing would never return. Its greatest prophet. Sometimes, a city loses its greatest treasure without realizing it. The farewell no one recorded. The Quran tells us that Ibrahim left his people for the sake of Allah. It does not describe every farewell. It does not mention tears, or conversations, or final embraces. Perhaps because the greatest farewells happen quietly. Imagine Ibrahim standing one final time beside the river that had witnessed his childhood. The flowing water reflected the early morning sky. Birds skimmed across its surface. Palm trees swayed gently in the cool breeze. Every memory of his youth lived here. The workshop of Azar. The towering temples. The streets where he first questioned idol worship. The valley where Allah saved him from the fire. He looked upon them one last time. Not with hatred, but with sadness. He had loved his people enough to warn them. Now, he entrusted them to Allah. The meaning of Hijra. The Arabic word Hijra means migration. But in the lives of the prophets, it means far more than changing locations. It means leaving behind falsehood for truth, leaving fear for trust, leaving comfort for obedience. Throughout history, believers have often been asked to sacrifice something precious. A home, a career, a familiar community, a lifelong habit. Every sincere act of leaving something for Allah becomes a form of Hijra. Ibrahim would become one of the greatest examples of this principle. We traveled with Ibrahim. The Quran mentions that Lut AS believed in Ibrahim and accompanied him during this stage of the journey. Sarah, Ibrahim's wife, also traveled with him. The Quran introduces Sarah later in the story, while authentic hadith and early Islamic historical sources also refer to her as his wife. Imagine this small caravan. No army, no royal escort, no magnificent procession. Only a few travelers crossing one of the oldest landscapes on earth. One prophet, his faithful wife, his believing nephew. Together, they carried something far more valuable than gold. They carried revelation. Across the Fertile Crescent. Leaving Mesopotamia meant traveling across lands that modern historians call the Fertile Crescent. This great arc of fertile land stretched from the valleys of the Tigris and Euphrates, across northern Syria, toward the hills of Canaan. The journey covered hundreds of miles. There were no paved roads, no bridges spanning every river, no maps printed upon paper. Travelers relied upon memory, the stars, ancient caravan routes, and above all, trust in Allah. Life on the ancient road. Travel in the ancient world demanded patience. At sunrise, the caravan packed its belongings. Water skins were carefully inspected. Animals were loaded with supplies. The travelers walked for hours beneath an ever-brightening sky. By midday, the desert heat became overwhelming. The air shimmered above the rocky ground. Dust clung to clothing and sandals. Occasionally they passed other caravans carrying wool, grain, spices, or precious metals. Greetings were exchanged. News from distant cities was shared. Then each continued on its separate path. At night, the world became astonishingly quiet. The stars stretched endlessly overhead. Campfires flickered beneath the vast sky. The silence invited reflection. The desert as a teacher. Modern people often see the desert as empty. Ancient travelers saw something different. The desert stripped away distractions. There were no crowded marketplaces, no towering palaces, no magnificent temples, only endless horizons, the wind, the sand, and the sky. It is perhaps no coincidence that so many prophets spent time in lonely places. Solitude often reveals what noise conceals. When everything unnecessary disappears, the heart begins listening more carefully. Trust beyond sight. Imagine Sarah walking beside Ibrahim. Neither of them knew exactly what tomorrow would bring. Where would they settle? Who would welcome them? Would they find food? Would they find water? Would another king oppose them? None of these questions had immediate answers. Faith does not always provide detailed maps. Sometimes, Allah reveals only the next step, and asks his servants to trust him with the rest. The prayer of a traveler. The Quran preserves Ibrahim's remarkable declaration. Indeed, I am going to my Lord. He will guide me. These words contain extraordinary confidence. Notice what he did not say. He did not say, I know exactly where I am going. He said, my Lord will guide me. This is the heart of tawakkul, placing one's trust in Allah. It is not passive. Ibrahim still walked, still traveled, still made decisions. But he knew that ultimate guidance belonged to Allah, the land of Canaan. Eventually, the caravan approached the region known in ancient times as Canaan. Its landscape differed from Mesopotamia. Rolling hills replaced broad river plains. Olive trees covered the slopes. Vineyards climbed rocky terraces. Spring rains nourished fertile valleys. Small villages dotted the countryside. Trade routes connected Egypt to Mesopotamia through these lands. The Quran describes this region as one that Allah blessed for the worlds. It would later become home to many prophets. Ishaq AS, Yaqub AS, Yusuf AS, Dawud AS, Sulaiman AS, Zachariah AS, Yahya AS, and Isa AS. Long before all of them, Ibrahim arrived as a humble traveler. A new beginning. Imagine the first evening after reaching this new land. The hills glowed golden beneath the setting sun. Gentle breezes carried the scent of wild herbs. Birds circled above distant valleys. There were no memories here. No childhood streets. No familiar landmarks. Everything was new. For many people, such uncertainty would feel frightening. For Ibrahim, it felt like freedom. The freedom to worship Allah without compromise. The freedom to begin again. Lut AS, the faithful companion. Among those traveling with Ibrahim was his nephew, Prophet Lut AS. The Quran tells us that Lut believed in Ibrahim. This detail is easy to overlook, yet it reminds us of something beautiful. Even when an entire nation rejects the truth, one sincere believer may still respond. Lut witnessed Ibrahim's courage, his patience, his unwavering faith. These experiences prepared Lut for the difficult mission Allah would later give him among another people. History often links the lives of prophets together in remarkable ways, a promise still unseen. At this point in the journey, Ibrahim and Sarah had no children. Years had passed. Their hopes had been tested repeatedly. Yet Allah had already planned a future beyond anything they could imagine. From this small traveling family, nations would emerge, prophets would arise, scriptures would descend, places of worship would be built. Billions of people across future generations would trace their spiritual heritage back to this quiet migration. At that moment, none of it was visible. Faith often begins long before the results appear. The lesson of leaving. One of the greatest lessons from Ibrahim's migration is this. Sometimes the greatest blessings lie beyond the places we are afraid to leave. He left wealth. Allah gave him honor. He left his homeland. Allah made him the father of prophets. He left familiar streets. Allah made his name remembered by billions. What we surrender for Allah is never truly lost. It is transformed. The horizon ahead. As another evening settled over the hills of Canaan, Ibrahim looked toward the western horizon. The sky burned with shades of crimson and gold. A cool wind swept across the valleys. The journey from Babylon had ended. Another journey was just beginning. A famine would force him toward Egypt. There, he would face another powerful ruler. Another test. Another demonstration of Allah's protection. The road of the prophets is never without trials. Yet every trial prepares them for a greater mission. A land of promise, and a time of hunger. The hills of Canaan were peaceful. The mornings arrived with gentle sunlight spilling across olive groves. The evenings were cool. Wildflowers bloomed among rocky terraces after the spring rains. Compared to the crowded cities of Mesopotamia, the land felt quiet. Its villages were small. Its valleys open. Its skies impossibly wide. For Ibrahim AS, it was a place where he could worship Allah without the overwhelming presence of idols that had filled Babylon. But even blessed lands experience hardship. One year, the rains became scarce. The soil hardened. Streams shrank. Fields that once promised abundant harvests yielded little grain. The wind carried dust instead of the scent of growing crops. Families looked anxiously toward the heavens. Farmers counted the remaining sacks of barley. Merchants found fewer goods arriving in local markets. The famine spread gradually, then relentlessly. It spared no one. Not the poor. Not the wealthy. Not even the household of a prophet. The ancient road to Egypt. In the ancient Near East, famine often forced entire communities to migrate. Without modern irrigation systems or global trade networks, a failed harvest threatened survival itself. One destination offered hope: Egypt. Every year, the Nile River overflowed its banks. Its floodwaters deposited rich black soil across the surrounding fields. Even when neighboring regions struggled with drought, Egypt often remained fertile. Its granaries became famous throughout the ancient world. Caravans from distant kingdoms traveled there seeking food. Among them would soon be Ibrahim and Sarah. Following the caravan route, imagine the long journey south. The caravan moved slowly across rugged hills and open plains. The sun rose behind them each morning, casting long shadows across the earth. By midday the heat became intense. Travelers wrapped cloth around their heads to shield themselves from the sun. Camels carried water skins, blankets, simple cooking pots, and the few possessions the family owned. At sunset they paused to rest. Small fires flickered beneath a sky overflowing with stars. The silence of the desert returned each night. In that silence, Ibrahim prayed, not for wealth, not for comfort, only for Allah's guidance. Sarah, a woman of extraordinary faith. Before continuing, we should pause to appreciate someone who often receives less attention than she deserves. Sarah, the wife of Ibrahim AS. The Quran later honors her by mentioning the joyful news of her future son, Ishaq AS. Authentic hadith also preserve important events from her life. Imagine the strength required to accompany Ibrahim. She left Babylon. She crossed deserts. She accepted uncertainty. She endured years without children. She trusted Allah through every stage of the journey. History often celebrates great men. Yet behind many prophets stood women of remarkable faith and patience. Sarah was one of them. The reputation of Egypt. As the caravan approached Egypt, travelers exchanged stories. Some spoke of enormous temples. Others described magnificent palaces. Many praised the Nile, whose waters transformed the desert into fertile farmland. But another warning spread among the caravans. The ruler of Egypt possessed enormous authority. His officials watched every visitor entering the kingdom. Beautiful women, according to authentic hadith, sometimes attracted the attention of the ruler. The stories unsettled many travelers. Yet Ibrahim remained calm. Whatever awaited them, Allah already knew. Entering the land of the Nile. The first sight of Egypt astonished nearly every traveler. After days crossing dry landscapes, the Nile appeared like a ribbon of life. Its waters reflected the bright morning sun. Palm trees lined its banks. Boats drifted slowly along the current. Farmers worked fertile fields rich with dark soil. Birds circled above green marshlands. Children played near irrigation canals. Compared with the dry hills of Canaan, Egypt seemed almost miraculous. No wonder ancient civilizations called the Nile the gift of life. Yet even the greatest river flows only because Allah allows it. A difficult conversation. Before entering populated areas, Ibrahim spoke privately with Sarah. This conversation is preserved in authentic hadith. He explained that oppressive rulers might seek to harm them if they believed Sarah was his wife. He therefore asked her, if questioned, to say that she was his sister. This statement has sometimes confused readers. Ibrahim did not mean biological sister. He meant sister in faith. Authentic hadith clarify this point explicitly. At that time there were very few believers upon the earth. Sarah truly was his sister in belief. The statement protected them from injustice without denying their shared faith. The palace learns of Sarah. News spread quickly through the royal administration. A caravan had arrived. Among its travelers was a woman of extraordinary beauty. Officials informed the king. Royal guards appeared. They questioned Ibrahim. Who was the woman traveling with him? Ibrahim answered carefully. She is my sister. The guards accepted the answer. Sarah was taken toward the palace. For many people, this would have been a moment of overwhelming fear. For Ibrahim, it became another opportunity to place complete trust in Allah. A prophet's prayer. After Sarah was taken, Ibrahim turned toward Allah in prayer. He possessed no army, no political influence, no wealth capable of changing the king's decision. Everything now rested in the hands of Allah. This is a recurring pattern throughout prophetic history. Whenever worldly means reached their limit, divine help remained limitless. Faith does not eliminate fear entirely, but it transforms fear into reliance upon the one who controls every outcome. Inside the royal palace. Imagine Sarah entering the palace. Tall columns rose toward elaborately painted ceilings. Servants hurried through spacious halls. Golden lamps illuminated polished stone floors. Incense filled the air. Guards stood silently beside enormous doors. Everything reflected earthly luxury. Yet Sarah's heart remained attached not to palaces, but to Allah. Authentic hadith narrate that when the king attempted to approach her with evil intentions, Allah prevented him. Suddenly, his body became rigid. He lost control of himself. Overcome with fear, he pleaded with Sarah to pray for him. She prayed. Allah relieved him. Yet the king repeated his attempt. Again he was struck. Again he begged for relief. Again Sarah prayed. A third time the same thing occurred. The king finally realized that she was under the protection of a power greater than his own. The king's realization. Imagine the king sitting in stunned silence. He had commanded armies, issued laws, ruled over one of the richest kingdoms in the world. Yet he could not overcome the protection Allah had placed around one believing woman. Power suddenly appeared very different. Crowns cannot command destiny. Palaces cannot overpower the decree of Allah. Kings govern only what Allah allows them to govern. Everything beyond that remains entirely in his hands. Hajar enters the story. According to authentic hadith, after recognizing Sarah's protected status, the king chose to release her unharmed. Not only that, he presented her with gifts. Among those gifts was a servant named Hagar. At that moment, no one inside the palace realized how significant this would become. Hajar appeared to be simply another servant entering Sarah's household. History often hides its greatest turning points inside ordinary moments. From Hajar would one day come Ismail AS. From Ismail would descend generations leading to Prophet Muhammad. The future quietly entered the story. Sarah returns. As evening approached, Sarah returned safely. Ibrahim saw her approaching from a distance. His prayers had been answered. Allah had protected her completely. She shared everything that had happened. The king's repeated failure, his fear, his eventual surrender, the unexpected gifts, including Hajar. The journey that began because of famine had now become another demonstration of Allah's care. Even apparent danger had become a means through which Allah prepared future blessings. The wisdom hidden in every trial. Looking back, it becomes clear that nothing in this journey happened by accident. The famine led them to Egypt. The king's injustice revealed Allah's protection. Hajar entered Ibrahim's household. A future chapter of history quietly unfolded. Believers often recognize Allah's wisdom only after events have passed. While walking through hardship, the path seems uncertain. Looking backward, the design becomes visible. A quiet night beside the Nile. That evening, the Nile flowed peacefully beneath the stars. Palm trees swayed gently in the cool breeze. Boats drifted silently along the river. The palace lights shimmered upon the water. Inside a modest camp nearby, Ibrahim, Sarah, and Hajar rested after an extraordinary day. They did not know exactly what tomorrow would bring, but they knew something greater. Allah had guided them this far. He would continue guiding them wherever the journey led. Another chapter would begin, one that would test patience in ways neither Ibrahim nor Sarah could yet imagine. Years passed like the desert wind. Time has a quiet way of changing everything. Empires rise, kings grow old, children become parents, cities expand, fields bloom and wither. Yet for Ibrahim AS and Sarah, one prayer seemed to remain unanswered. Year after year, they waited for a child. Each passing season carried new hope. Then another year slipped away. Another harvest came and went. Still, their home remained silent. No small footsteps echoed through their tent. No child's laughter greeted the sunrise. No young voice called Ibrahim father. The silence became its own kind of test. The weight of waiting. Waiting is among the greatest tests of faith. It is easier to trust Allah when answers come quickly. It is harder when years pass without visible change. Imagine Sarah sitting outside the family tent at sunset. The sky glowed with deep shades of gold and crimson. The evening breeze carried the scent of wild grasses. Nearby families played with their children. Mothers sang gentle lullabies. Fathers taught their sons how to tend sheep. Sarah watched quietly. She smiled for others. But deep inside, only Allah knew the weight she carried. She never abandoned her faith. She never blamed Allah. She simply continued to trust. Sometimes, the strongest faith is expressed not through dramatic actions, but through patient endurance. Allah's promise never fails. Long before Ibrahim ever became a father, Allah already knew every detail of the future. Nothing had been forgotten. Nothing had been delayed by accident. The Quran repeatedly teaches that Allah's timing is perfect. Human beings see days. Allah sees generations. Ibrahim hoped for one child. Allah planned an entire nation. He hoped for a family. Allah prepared prophets. He prayed for a son. Allah intended that billions of believers would one day remember his name. The answer was coming. But it would arrive exactly when Allah had decreed. Hajar joins the household. After their journey to Egypt, Hajar became part of Ibrahim and Sarah's household. Authentic hadith confirmed that she came as a gift from the Egyptian ruler after Allah protected Sarah. Very little is mentioned in the Quran about Hajar herself. Her greatest honor comes through the role Allah chose for her. History often overlooks quiet people. Allah does not. Hajar was known for her patience, her dignity, her faith. She served Sarah faithfully. Years passed peacefully. The household remained united. But the question of children still remained. Sarah's remarkable decision. As Sarah grew older, she recognized something difficult. Humanly speaking, the possibility of bearing children had become increasingly remote. According to Islamic tradition, Sarah herself suggested that Ibrahim marry Hajar. This was not an easy decision. It required extraordinary generosity. Imagine the emotions involved. The hopes, the fears, the uncertainty. Yet Sarah desired that Ibrahim might finally become a father. History often remembers miracles. But behind many miracles stand acts of remarkable sacrifice. Sarah's willingness to place Allah's plan above her own emotions reflects tremendous strength of character. A new chapter begins. Ibrahim married Hajar. The household entered a new season. Life continued much as before. The tents remained filled with prayer. Guests continued arriving as hospitality was one of Ibrahim's beloved qualities. Travelers found welcome at his home. The poor were fed. The needy received help. Every day began with gratitude to Allah. Still, no child had yet arrived. Even after the marriage, the waiting continued. Sometimes Allah delays blessings, not as punishment, but to prepare hearts to appreciate them fully. The prayer that echoed through the night. Many nights, Ibrahim stood beneath a sky overflowing with stars. The silence of the desert surrounded him. The constellations stretched across the heavens like countless lamps. He raised his hands toward Allah. The Quran preserves one of his beautiful supplications. My Lord, grant me from among the righteous. Surah As-Safat 37:100. Notice the wisdom of the prayer. He did not simply ask for a child. He asked for a righteous child. A child whose life would please Allah. A believer understands that character matters more than worldly success. Glad tidings. Then, after years of waiting, the answer finally arrived. The Quran tells us, so we gave him glad tidings of a forbearing boy. Surah As-Safat 37:101. The Arabic word used here describes extraordinary patience, gentleness, and self-control. Before the child was even born, Allah described his character. This child would become known throughout history as Ismail AS, one of the greatest prophets, the ancestor of the final messenger, Muhammad, a leader whose life would become inseparably connected to the sacred house in Mecca. The birth of Ismail AS. Imagine the joy that filled the household. After decades of waiting, a baby cried for the first time. Ibrahim held his son in his arms. The tiny fingers wrapped around his father's hand. The child looked toward the world with innocent eyes. Sarah smiled. Hajar smiled. The entire household rejoiced. Every unanswered prayer, every difficult year, every tear of patience, had led to this moment. Allah's promise had begun unfolding. The love of a father. Ibrahim was no longer only a prophet. He was now a father. He watched Ismail grow. The child's first smile. His first steps. His first words. The small footprints around the camp. The laughter echoing between the tents. Each day became another blessing. Imagine Ibrahim carrying young Ismail across the fields, teaching him kindness, showing him the beauty of Allah's creation. A father's heart naturally grows attached to his child. Allah had granted Ibrahim something precious. That very love would become the greatest test of his life. A child destined for greatness. The Quran repeatedly praises Ismail AS. He would grow into a man known for truthfulness, patience, faithfulness, and complete obedience to Allah. Generations later, his descendants would inhabit the valley of Mecca. Among them would arise the seal of the prophets, Muhammad. Looking at the infant Ismail, no one could yet imagine the future. History often begins quietly. Greatness rarely announces itself. A family blessed by Allah. Now the household contained 3 remarkable believers: Ibrahim, Sarah, Hajar, and the young child Ismail. Each would play a unique role in Allah's plan. Each would experience different trials. Each would demonstrate extraordinary faith. Their lives remind us that Allah's wisdom often unfolds across many years. No single chapter reveals the entire story. The quiet before another test. Life appeared peaceful. The camp rested beneath brilliant desert skies. Sheep grazed nearby. Travelers came and went. The seasons continued changing. Young Ismail grew stronger each day. To anyone watching from the outside, it seemed the years of hardship had finally ended. But Allah was preparing another command, one so difficult that it would become one of the greatest demonstrations of trust ever shown by a human being. The command would not concern kings, or armies, or idols. It would concern a father, a mother, and a baby. The destination would be a barren valley, where no city yet existed, no crops, no river, no permanent settlement, only mountains, sand, and Allah's promise, the hidden beginning of Mecca. At this moment, no one had heard of Mecca. There was no Kaaba standing among its mountains. No pilgrims circled a sacred sanctuary. No call to prayer echoed through its valleys. It appeared to be an empty wilderness. Yet Allah had already chosen it. The place that looked most abandoned would one day become the spiritual heart of millions. And it all began with one family willing to obey without hesitation. The command that broke a father's heart. There are moments in the lives of the prophets that seem almost impossible to imagine, not because they lack faith, but because they reveal just how complete their trust in Allah truly was. After the birth of Ismail AS, life became filled with joy. The child was healthy. His laughter brightened the camp. His tiny hands reached toward his father whenever Ibrahim AS returned from his daily work. Every day strengthened the bond between father and son. But, without warning, Allah gave Ibrahim one of the most difficult commands of his life. He was to take Hajar and the infant Ismail to a distant valley, leave them there, and return alone. No explanation, no promise of immediate comfort, only a command from Allah. The long journey south. Imagine the caravan setting out before dawn. The desert air was cool. The stars still filled the heavens. Ibrahim walked beside his camel. Hajar carried the baby close to her chest. The child slept peacefully, unaware that he was traveling toward a place where history itself would begin. They crossed rocky plains. They passed dry riverbeds. They climbed through narrow mountain passes. Days became weeks. The familiar lands of Canaan disappeared behind them. The landscape grew harsher. Vegetation became scarce. Water became precious. Still, Ibrahim never questioned Allah's command. He continued walking, one faithful step after another. The valley of Baca. Eventually, the mountains opened to reveal a silent valley. No villages, no wells, no rivers, no farms, no palm trees. Only rough granite mountains rising from endless sand. The air was still. The ground was dry. Even birds seemed absent. This valley would later become known as Mecca. The Quran also refers to it as Baca. At that moment, it appeared to be one of the most unlikely places on earth for human life. Yet Allah had chosen it for a purpose beyond human imagination. A small supply. Ibrahim unloaded the few provisions he had carried. a leather water skin, a small bag containing dates. Very little. Enough for only a short time. No hidden store of food. No nearby settlement. No visible source of water. Nothing suggested survival. From a human perspective, the situation seemed impossible. But Allah's plans are never limited by human calculations. The silence between husband and wife. Ibrahim placed the supplies beside Hajar. Then, without saying a word, he turned and began walking away. Imagine Hajar watching him. At first, perhaps she assumed he had forgotten something. Maybe he was checking the surroundings. Maybe he intended to return in a few moments. But he kept walking. Farther. Farther still. She called after him. Ibrahim. No answer. Again she called. He continued walking. The distance between them grew larger. The question that changed everything. Finally, Hajar hurried after him. Authentic hadith in Sahih al-Bukhari preserve this unforgettable moment. She asked him, "Are you leaving us in this valley where there is no one and nothing?" He remained silent. Again she asked. Still, no reply. Then she asked the question that revealed the depth of her faith. "Has Allah commanded you to do this?" For the first time, Ibrahim stopped. Without turning around, he answered, "Yes." Only one word. But it changed everything. One of the greatest statements of trust. When Hajar heard that Allah had commanded it, she did not collapse in despair. She did not accuse Allah. She did not argue with Ibrahim. Instead, she spoke words remembered by believers for thousands of years. "Then Allah will never abandon us." Pause for a moment. She still stood in an empty valley. There was still no water. No village. No visible hope. Nothing around her had changed. Only one thing had changed. She now knew that Allah had ordered it. And that knowledge was enough. Faith is not believing after seeing miracles. Faith is trusting Allah before the miracle arrives. The prayer of Ibrahim AS. As Ibrahim climbed the surrounding hills, he finally stopped. He turned toward the valley. From that distance, Hajar and baby Ismail appeared very small. His heart was heavy, but his trust was complete. The Quran preserves the beautiful prayer he made. "Our Lord, I have settled some of my descendants in an uncultivated valley near your sacred house, our Lord, that they may establish prayer." Surah Ibrahim 14:37. Notice something remarkable. The Kaaba had not yet been rebuilt. The city did not yet exist. Yet Ibrahim referred to the place as being near your sacred house. Because Allah had already chosen that location long before human beings recognized its importance. The last glimpse. Imagine Ibrahim standing upon the rocky hillside. The wind carried fine desert sand across the valley. Below, Hajar held the baby close. The small bag of dates rested beside her. The water skin lay upon the ground. Nothing else. No shelters. No neighbors. No caravans. Only mountains surrounding silence. Every instinct of fatherhood must have urged him to return, to remain, to protect them. Yet obedience to Allah required something greater. With tears in his eyes, he continued walking, until the valley disappeared behind the hills. The water runs out. Days passed. The dates slowly disappeared. The water skin became lighter each morning. Eventually, the final drops were gone. The desert sun climbed higher. The heat became unbearable. Baby Ismail began crying from thirst. Imagine Hajar trying to comfort him, rocking him gently, whispering softly, looking again and again at the empty water skin. Her own throat had become dry, but the cries of her child pierced her heart far more deeply than her own thirst. A mother can endure hunger. She can endure exhaustion. But watching her child suffer, that is a different kind of pain. The first climb, Safa. Hajar looked around desperately. Perhaps there was water nearby. Perhaps another caravan. Perhaps someone could help. The nearest high point was a rocky hill. Today we know it as Safa. She climbed quickly. The stones burned beneath her feet. She reached the top. She searched every direction. Nothing. Only shimmering heat stretching toward the horizon. No movement. No water. Only silence. Running through the valley. She hurried down the hill, crossing the valley floor as quickly as she could. The ground was uneven. The heat rose like waves from the sand. She reached another rocky hill. Today, it is known as Marwa. Again she searched. Again. Nothing. No travelers. No wells. No rivers. No clouds. 7 times. She refused to surrender. Again she returned to Safa. Again to Marwa. Back and forth. Again. 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 7 times. Every climb carried hope. Every descent brought disappointment. Yet she kept searching. Not because she doubted Allah, but because trusting Allah does not mean abandoning effort. Faith and action walk together. Even today, millions of pilgrims perform Sa'i, walking between Safa and Marwa during Hajj and Umrah, remembering Hajar's determination and trust. A cry. Then a miracle. After the 7th journey, Hajar hurried back toward her child. Then, she heard something unexpected. A sound. Not the wind. Not Ismael's crying. Something else. She looked closely. Near the place where the baby lay. The earth had begun to change. Authentic hadith narrate that the angel Gabriel, struck the ground or the earth near it, by Allah's command. Suddenly, water burst from the barren valley. Clear, fresh, abundant, flowing where moments before there had been only dry sand. Hajar rushed toward it in astonishment. She cupped the water with her hands. She quickly built a small barrier around the spring, saying, Zam, Zam, stop, stop, or gather, gather. According to authentic narrations, this is how the blessed well came to be known as Zamzam. She drank deeply. She gave water to baby Ismail. His crying ceased. Life had returned to the valley, a spring that never ends. The Prophet Muhammad later spoke about Zamzam with immense honor. He described it as a blessed water and a provision from Allah. For thousands of years, empires have risen and fallen. Kings have disappeared. Languages have changed. Yet the well of Zamzam continues to flow. Millions drink from it every year. A miracle born from a mother's trust has become a blessing for generations. The valley is no longer empty. The appearance of water changed everything. Birds began circling overhead. In the desert, birds often reveal the presence of water. Passing caravans noticed them. Among those caravans was the tribe of Jurhum, who asked permission to settle near the spring. Hajar agreed, while maintaining her right to the water that Allah had granted. Slowly, tents appeared. Families settled. Children played. Trade routes developed. The once empty valley began its transformation into a community. Without realizing it, these people were witnessing the birth of the future city of Mecca. The wisdom behind the trial. Looking back, every painful moment had a purpose. The loneliness, the thirst, the searching, the tears. Without them, there would have been no Zamzam. Without Zamzam, there would have been no settlement. Without the settlement, the Kaaba would not become the center of a thriving community. Allah's greatest blessings sometimes begin in places that appear completely hopeless. The valley comes alive. Years passed. The lonely valley was no longer silent. What had once been nothing more than dry earth and scattered stones had slowly become a living community. The spring of Zamzam continued to flow. Its clear water never seemed to diminish. Travelers crossing the Arabian Peninsula began speaking of a miraculous well hidden among barren mountains. Caravans adjusted their routes. Nomads rested beside the water. Children laughed where once only the desert wind had been heard. Simple tents gradually multiplied. Cooking fires illuminated the evenings. The call of shepherds echoed through the valley. Goats grazed on sparse vegetation that appeared after seasonal rains. The once forgotten valley had become home. And at its center, a young boy was growing. The child of the desert, Ismail AS, knew no palace. He knew no city walls. No royal gardens. His childhood belonged to the open desert. Each morning he awoke beneath an endless blue sky. The mountains surrounded the valley like silent guardians. The air carried the scent of warm stone and dry earth. He watched birds circle above Zamzam. He learned the names of desert plants. He discovered how every living creature depended upon the precious spring Allah had provided. Unlike princes raised among luxury, Ismail grew surrounded by simplicity. Yet simplicity often produces extraordinary strength. The tribe of Jurhum. The tribe of Jurhum had settled near Zamzam with Hajar's permission. They respected her. They understood that the blessed spring belonged to Allah and had first been entrusted to her family. Over the years, the people came to admire young Ismail. He possessed qualities unusual for a child. He was gentle, truthful, respectful, quick to help others. The elders noticed that he listened carefully before speaking. Children naturally followed him. He never sought attention. Yet attention seemed to follow him. Great character often reveals itself quietly. Learning the language of Arabia. Islamic historical tradition records that Ismail learned the Arabic language from the Jurhum tribe. Although the exact historical development of Arabic is complex and extends across many centuries, the traditional Islamic narrative remembers Ismail as becoming fluent among the people of Jurhum and later marrying from among them. Imagine the young boy sitting beside tribal elders, listening to stories passed down through generations, learning new words, new expressions, new poetry. The desert itself became his classroom. Every traveler brought another lesson. Every elder shared another memory. Without realizing it, Allah was preparing Ismail for a future role that would influence generations yet unborn. Visits from his father. Although Ibrahim AS no longer lived permanently in the valley, he did not forget his family. From time to time, he traveled across the long desert routes to visit Hajar and his son. Imagine the excitement. A distant figure appeared on the horizon. The boy shaded his eyes against the sun. Then recognition. Father. The child ran. The father opened his arms. Years of separation disappeared in a single embrace. Ibrahim watched Ismail grow taller with every visit. His shoulders became broader. His voice stronger. The tiny infant left beside Zamzam had become a capable young man. Each reunion filled Ibrahim's heart with gratitude. Every farewell tested it once again. A father watches his son mature. The Quran beautifully describes the stage Ismail eventually reached. It says, "Then when he reached the age of working alongside him." Surah As-Safat 37:102. Notice the wording. Not merely when he became older, but when he became capable of working beside his father. Imagine them walking together through the valley, gathering firewood, repairing tents, leading animals to water, sharing conversations beneath the stars. For Ibrahim, these were the years every parent treasures. The child had become a companion, the dream. Then, one night, everything changed. While the valley slept beneath countless stars, Ibrahim experienced a dream unlike any other. The prophets received true dreams as a form of revelation. This was no ordinary dream. He saw himself sacrificing his beloved son. He awoke, deeply moved, perhaps hoping it required interpretation, perhaps praying he had misunderstood. The next night, the same dream returned. Yet, the command remained unmistakable. Then came a third night. The message was now absolutely clear. Allah had commanded him. The greatest test yet. Consider everything Ibrahim had already endured. He challenged idol worship. He debated kings. He was thrown into the fire. He left his homeland. He left Hajar and baby Ismail in a barren valley. Every test had prepared him for this one. Because now, Allah was asking about something different. Not his homeland. Not his safety. Not his reputation. His son. The child for whom he had prayed for decades. The child whose birth had brought unimaginable joy. The child through whom Allah had promised great things. This was the most difficult command of his entire life. A conversation unlike any other. Many fathers would hide such a burden. Not Ibrahim. The Quran preserves one of the most moving conversations ever recorded between a father and his son. He gently said, "O my beloved son, indeed I have seen in a dream that I am sacrificing you. So tell me, what do you think?" Pause and appreciate the tenderness. He did not issue an order. He did not frighten the boy. He spoke with love, respect, honesty. Even in the greatest trial, his compassion remained. The reply that echoes through eternity. Imagine the silence after those words. The desert wind moved gently across the valley. The mountains stood still. Young Ismail looked at his father. He understood. This was not merely a dream. This was Allah's command. Then, he answered with words that have inspired believers for thousands of years. The Quran records, "O my dear father, do as you are commanded. If Allah wills, you will find me among the patient." Surah As-Safat 37:102. No fear. No complaint. No attempt to flee. No questioning Allah's wisdom. Only complete submission. A father prepared to obey. A son prepared to obey. This was not the story of one believer. It was the story of two hearts completely surrendered to Allah. The journey begins. The next morning, father and son prepared for a journey. The sun had not yet risen above the mountains. The air remained cool. The valley slept peacefully. No crowds gathered. No dramatic speeches were made. Only two travelers quietly walked into the desert. Imagine Hajar watching them leave. She had witnessed many departures before. Perhaps this one seemed no different. Only Allah knew what lay ahead. The path wound between rocky hills. The silence of the desert surrounded them. Neither father nor son spoke much. Some journeys require no words. The whisper of Shaitan. Islamic tradition relates that during this journey, Shaitan attempted to discourage Ibrahim, Hajar, and Ismail from obeying Allah. These accounts are reflected in the traditional explanation for the ritual of Rami al-Jamarat during Hajj, where pilgrims throw stones at symbolic pillars. While these details come from Islamic tradition rather than the Quran itself, they beautifully emphasize an important lesson. Every act of obedience is accompanied by whispers of doubt. Every sincere believer faces moments where fear tries to replace trust. But Ibrahim and his family rejected every whisper. Their confidence remained with Allah alone, the place of sacrifice. Eventually, they reached the place Allah had destined for this extraordinary test. The mountains stood silent. The wind barely moved. The sky stretched endlessly above them. Ibrahim looked at his son. His heart overflowed with love. Yet his love for Allah remained greater still. The moment had come. The command would be fulfilled. Or so it seemed. Because sometimes, Allah tests not to take something away, but to reveal what already exists within the heart. The trial before the miracle. History often remembers the ram. The celebration of Eid al-Adha. The joyful ending. But before joy came, there was complete surrender. The miracle had not yet appeared. No angel had yet descended. No voice had yet called from heaven. At this moment, father and son believed the sacrifice would truly happen. That sincerity is what made their submission one of the greatest acts of faith in all human history. A morning unlike any other. The desert was silent. Not the ordinary silence of an empty wilderness. A deeper silence. The kind that settles over the world before history changes forever. The first light of dawn slowly crept across the mountains surrounding the valley. The sky shifted from deep indigo to soft shades of silver and gold. A cool breeze moved gently between the rocky hills. Far away, birds began greeting the new day. Nothing in nature suggested that one of the greatest moments in human history was about to unfold. Yet in that lonely valley, a father and a son stood together, united not merely by blood, but by complete submission to Allah. Two hearts, one faith. Imagine Ibrahim AS looking into the eyes of Ismail. Years earlier, he had prayed for this child. He had waited through decades of uncertainty. Allah had answered with a righteous son. He had watched Ismail grow. He had carried him, protected him, taught him, loved him. Now, the very blessing Allah had granted seemed to be returning to its giver. For many people, love and obedience compete. For Ibrahim, love itself became an act of obedience, because every blessing belongs to Allah before it belongs to us. Preparing for the command, the Quran tells us, then when they had both submitted. Surah As-Safat 37:103. Notice the wording. Not when Ibrahim submitted. Not when Ismail submitted. When they both submitted. This was not only a father's test. It was also a son's. Their hearts moved together toward the command of Allah. One willing to sacrifice, the other willing to be sacrificed. Neither knowing exactly how the story would end. The final request. Classical Islamic narrations preserve touching details about this moment. While these details are not found explicitly in the Quran, many scholars have mentioned them throughout Islamic history. It is reported that Ismail said to his father, "Tie me firmly so I do not struggle. Sharpen your blade. And turn my face away so you will not hesitate." Whether every wording is historically certain or not, the narrations express something profound. Ismail was concerned not only for himself, but for his father's heart. Imagine such maturity, such trust, such love. A father's tears. Imagine Ibrahim kneeling beside his son. His hands trembled, not because he doubted Allah, but because he loved his child. Prophets are not without emotion. They feel sorrow. They feel joy. They feel love more deeply than most people. Their greatness lies in never allowing emotion to overpower obedience. Tears filled Ibrahim's eyes, yet his resolve remained firm. Sometimes, faith does not remove tears. It gives them purpose. Face turned toward the earth. The Quran says, and he laid him down upon his forehead. Surah As-Safat 37:103. Scholars explain that Ibrahim placed Ismail face down. Many have reflected that perhaps this made the test slightly easier for the father. Looking directly into his beloved son's face at that final moment would have made the trial even more overwhelming. The desert wind moved softly. Neither father nor son resisted. The heavens watched. The earth waited. Even the angels, according to Islamic tradition, witnessed a moment unlike any other. The knife is raised. Imagine the silence. No crowds. No applause. No witnesses except Allah and His creation. Ibrahim lifted the knife. His heart belonged entirely to Allah. Every worldly attachment had been surrendered. This was not about sacrifice. It was about obedience. The knife began to descend. But something extraordinary happened. By Allah's command, the blade did not fulfill its normal purpose. Islamic tradition often describes that the knife could not cut because Allah had already decreed another outcome. The Quran does not focus on the mechanics. Instead, it directs our attention toward the miracle itself. The voice from the heavens. Then, the silence broke. Allah called to Ibrahim. The Quran records, "O Ibrahim, imagine hearing your name called by the Lord of the worlds." Everything stopped. The knife, the movement, the test. The command continued. "You have fulfilled the vision." Those words changed history. Allah never intended the death of Ismail. Allah intended to reveal the sincerity of both father and son. The test had reached its completion. The greatest success. The Quran continues. Indeed, this was the clear trial. Surah As-Safat 37:106. Not a punishment. A trial. There is an important difference. Punishment comes because of wrongdoing. A trial often comes because Allah wishes to elevate someone. Gold is purified through fire. Faith is purified through tests. Ibrahim and Ismail emerged from this trial among the greatest examples of submission the world has ever known. The ram from Allah. Then came one of the most beautiful verses in the story. Allah says, "And we ransomed him with a magnificent sacrifice." Surah As-Safat 37:107. A ram was provided. Its origin is not detailed in the Quran. Some Islamic traditions describe it as coming from paradise. Whether one focuses on those narrations or only on the Quranic text, the essential truth remains. Allah Himself provided the substitute. The sacrifice was accepted. The son was saved. Mercy triumphed. The embrace. Imagine Ibrahim quickly lifting Ismail into his arms. The father who believed he was about to lose his son now held him again. No words could fully express that moment. Only tears. Gratitude. Relief. Love. Above them, the desert sky stretched endlessly. Below them, the earth had witnessed one of humanity's greatest acts of faith. The mountains themselves seemed forever changed. Allah honors Ibrahim forever. The Quran declares, and we left for him favorable mention among later generations. Surah As-Safat 37:108. What does this mean? Thousands of years later, billions still remember Ibrahim. Jews honor him. Christians honor him. Muslims honor him. His story is told in homes, mosques, churches, synagogues, universities, books, languages across every continent. Very few human beings have left such a legacy. Allah fulfilled his promise completely. The meaning of sacrifice. Some people misunderstand this story. They imagine Allah desired blood. The Quran teaches something entirely different. Later, while speaking about the sacrifices offered during Hajj, Allah says, neither their meat nor their blood reaches Allah. Rather, what reaches him is your piety. Surah Al-Hajj 22:37. The lesson has never been about animals. It has always been about hearts. What are we willing to place before Allah? Our pride? Our greed? Our selfishness? Our desires? True sacrifice begins long before an animal is offered. It begins inside the soul. The birth of Eid al-Adha. Every year, millions of Muslims remember this event during Eid al-Adha. Families gather. Prayers fill the morning air. Animals are sacrificed. Meat is shared with relatives, neighbors, and especially those in need. The celebration is not simply about tradition. It is a reminder. A reminder that Allah's mercy follows sincere obedience. A reminder that no sacrifice made for Allah is ever wasted. A reminder that Ibrahim and Ismail trusted Allah completely, and Allah honored them beyond imagination. The valley prepares for another miracle. Life gradually returned to normal. Ismail continued growing into a noble young man. The spring of Zamzam continued flowing. The tribe of Juram prospered. The valley slowly became a small settlement. But Allah had another task waiting for Ibrahim and Ismail. One day, father and son would stand together once again. Not before a place of sacrifice, but before empty ground. There, they would rebuild a house unlike any other. A house first established by Allah. A house that would become the direction of prayer for Muslims across the world. The Kaaba. Its stones still waited beneath the desert soil. Their hands would raise them once again. A valley no longer empty. Many years had passed since Hajar had first stood alone beside the spring of Zamzam. The valley had changed. Simple tents had become a growing settlement. The tribe of Juram had established homes around the blessed well. Children's laughter echoed between the mountains. Caravans stopped regularly to refill their water supplies. Merchants rested beneath the shade of temporary shelters. The once forgotten valley had become a place of life. Yet its greatest purpose had not yet been fulfilled. Allah had chosen this valley for something far greater than a settlement. It would become the spiritual center of humanity. The return of Ibrahim AS. One morning, a familiar traveler appeared on the distant horizon. The desert sun rose behind him. Its golden light stretched across the rocky ground. The figure walked with steady determination. Ismail recognized him almost immediately. His father had returned. Imagine the reunion. Years had passed since the trial of sacrifice. The memories of that unforgettable day remained alive in both their hearts. Now father and son embraced once again. Their love had grown even deeper. Every meeting reminded them that Allah's mercy had carried them through every hardship, a command older than civilization. After the reunion, Allah revealed another command. This command was unlike any before it. There would be no debate with kings, no confrontation with idol worshippers, no journey into fire. Instead, Allah instructed Ibrahim and Ismail to rebuild his sacred house. The Quran says, and when Ibrahim was raising the foundations of the house, and Ismail with him. Surah Al-Baqarah 2:127. Notice the wording carefully. Raising the foundations. Islamic scholars have traditionally understood this to mean that the Kaaba's original foundations already existed by Allah's decree from an earlier time, and Ibrahim and Ismail were commanded to rebuild upon those foundations. The Quran does not describe every historical detail before Ibrahim. It simply tells us that they raised the foundations already there. Searching for the foundations. Imagine father and son walking across the valley floor. The morning air remained cool. The mountains cast long shadows over the earth. Guided by Allah, they searched for the ancient foundations. Eventually, the outlines became clear beneath the sand and stones. This was the place, not chosen by human kings, not selected because of fertile land, not because of trade, chosen by Allah Himself. Everything else in the valley would one day change. Empires would rise and fall. Languages would evolve. Roads would appear and disappear. But this location would remain sacred until the end of time. The first stones. The work began quietly. There were no crowds, no celebrations, no royal architects, only two prophets, a father, a son, and complete devotion to Allah. Ismail carried large stones from the surrounding hills. His hands became dusty. His shoulders grew tired beneath the weight. Ibrahim carefully placed each stone upon the growing walls. Neither complained, neither hurried. Every stone was an act of worship. Every movement carried intention. Every breath remembered Allah. The beautiful dua. While building, the Quran tells us they made one of the most beautiful prayers ever recorded. Imagine them lifting heavy stones under the warm Arabian sun, their clothes covered in dust, their hands rough from work, yet their hearts remained humble. They repeatedly prayed, "Our Lord, accept this from us. Indeed, you are the all-hearing, the all-knowing." Surah Al-Baqarah 2:127. Pause for a moment. They were prophets. They were directly obeying Allah's command. Yet they still asked Allah to accept their work. This teaches one of Islam's greatest lessons. No matter how righteous our actions appear, we should never assume they have automatically been accepted. Acceptance belongs to Allah alone. Building with humility. Imagine watching them work throughout the day. The walls slowly rose, stone upon stone, course upon course. No expensive decorations, no gold, no marble, no towering gates. Only simple stones placed with sincerity. The greatness of the Kaaba has never come from its material. It comes from the one to whom it belongs. All throughout history, many magnificent buildings have disappeared. The Kaaba has remained because Allah Himself honored it. Maqam Ibrahim. As the walls became taller, Ibrahim needed to reach higher. Islamic tradition tells us that a stone was brought for him to stand upon while building the upper sections. This stone became known as Maqam Ibrahim. According to authentic Islamic tradition, the marks of Ibrahim's feet remained upon it by Allah's will. Today, pilgrims visiting Mecca still see the place known as Maqam Ibrahim near the Kaaba. The Quran itself says, "Take the standing place of Ibrahim as a place of prayer." Surah Al-Baqarah 2:125. The simple stone became honored because a prophet stood upon it while obeying Allah. The house nears completion. Days passed, perhaps weeks. The walls gradually reached their intended height. The square shape became recognizable. The entrance took form. The open courtyard surrounding it remained quiet. No city yet surrounded the house. Only mountains, the spring of Zamzam, a few homes, and the growing sanctuary. Imagine standing there at sunset. The final rays of light reflected softly from the newly built walls. The valley glowed with peaceful silence. It was simple, yet magnificent beyond words. Another beautiful prayer. When the work was nearly complete, Ibrahim and Ismail made another heartfelt supplication. The Quran records, "Our Lord, make us Muslims in submission to you, and from our descendants a nation submitting to you. Show us our rites of worship and accept our repentance. Indeed, you are the accepting of repentance, the most merciful." Surah Al-Baqarah 2:128. Notice something extraordinary. Even prophets asked Allah to keep them steadfast. Faith is never something to become arrogant about. It is a blessing to be protected. The prayer for the final messenger. Then came one of the most remarkable du'as in history. Ibrahim prayed,
Our Lord, send among them a messenger from themselves who will recite to them your verses, teach them the book and wisdom, and purify them. Surah Al-Baqarah 2:129. Centuries passed. Empires rose and disappeared. Generations came and went. Then, more than 2,000 years later, in that very valley, Allah answered Ibrahim's prayer. A child named Muhammad was born in Mecca. He recited Allah's verses. He taught the Quran. He purified hearts, exactly as Ibrahim had prayed. The command to call humanity. When the Kaaba stood completed, Allah gave Ibrahim another command. The Quran says, "And proclaim the pilgrimage among mankind. They will come to you on foot and on every lean camel. They will come from every distant mountain pass." Surah Al-Hajj 22:27. Imagine Ibrahim looking across the empty valley. There were only a few families living nearby. How could he possibly call all humanity? Some Islamic traditions mention that Ibrahim wondered who would hear his call. Allah assured him, "Call. The responsibility for making it reach people belongs to me." So Ibrahim obeyed. He proclaimed the invitation, the call that never ended. According to Islamic tradition, Allah caused that call to reach hearts across generations. Year after year, century after century, people answered. Empires disappeared. Roads changed. Languages evolved. Still, the call continued. Today, millions travel from every continent. Some arrive on foot, others by ship, train, car, or airplane. Different languages, different cultures, different skin colors. One destination, one house, one Lord. The prayer of Ibrahim continues to live before our eyes. The Kaaba's true purpose. The Kaaba is not worshipped. Muslims do not pray to it. They pray toward it. It serves as a point of unity. Every day, millions of believers around the world face the same direction. From crowded cities, remote villages, mountains, deserts, forests, islands, all turning toward the house built by Ibrahim and Ismail. One Qibla, one Ummah, one Creator, the legacy of two builders. Imagine the father and son standing together as the sun slowly disappeared behind the mountains. Their work was finished. The house stood complete. Neither sought recognition. Neither expected statues to be raised in their honor. Their reward belonged to Allah alone. They could not see the future. They could not see the millions who would one day circle the Kaaba, or the countless prayers offered there. But Allah saw it all. Every pilgrim, every tear, every dua, every prostration. Their simple act of obedience became one of the greatest legacies in human history. A new test approaches. The years ahead would bring more blessings, more trials, another son, another prophet, the miraculous birth of Ishaq AS, the promise of Yaqub AS, the continuation of prophetic history through two noble lineages. The story of Ibrahim was far from over. It had only entered its greatest chapter. Angels visit Ibrahim, the miraculous promise of Ishaq AS, and the secret mission to the people of Lut AS. A quiet evening in the desert. The Kaaba had been completed. The house of Allah now stood peacefully in the valley of Mecca. Life continued for Prophet Ibrahim AS. His faith had been tested by fire, by exile, by loneliness, by sacrifice. Yet another extraordinary moment was about to unfold. Not through kings, not through miracles witnessed by crowds, but through unexpected guests. Three travelers appear. One peaceful day, as the desert sun began to descend, Ibrahim noticed several travelers approaching his home. Their appearance was noble. Their clothes were clean despite the harsh desert. Their faces carried dignity and calm. They greeted him with a single word, peace. Ibrahim immediately replied, "Peace be upon you." The Quran records this beautiful exchange. Our messengers came to Ibrahim with good news. They said, "Peace." He answered, "Peace?
and without delay he brought a roasted calf. Surah Hud 11 hours 69 minutes. The hospitality of a prophet. Hospitality was one of Ibrahim's greatest qualities. He did not ask who they were. He did not question where they had come from. He simply hurried to honor his guests. Without delay, he selected one of his finest calves. It was carefully roasted, prepared with generosity, then respectfully placed before the visitors. This was the character of Ibrahim, serving others before serving himself. Something was wrong. The food was ready. The aroma filled the air. Everything seemed normal, except the guests did not eat, not even a single bite. In ancient cultures, refusing food was highly unusual. Ibrahim watched silently. His heart grew uneasy. The Quran says, when he saw that their hands did not reach toward the food, he found this strange and felt fear of them. Surah Hud 11 hours 70 minutes. He wondered, who were these strangers? Why would hungry travelers refuse food? The great revelation. Seeing his concern, the visitors spoke. Their words immediately removed his fear. Do not be afraid. Then came the astonishing truth. They were not ordinary travelers. They were angels, messengers sent by Allah. And they had come with two missions. One brought unimaginable joy. The other carried divine judgment, the impossible promise. The angels first delivered glad tidings. Allah would bless Ibrahim with another son, a son named Ishaq AS. Not only that, his grandson Yaqub AS would also come after him. The Quran says, we gave her glad tidings of Ishaq, and after Ishaq, Yaqub. Surah Hud 11 hours 71 minutes. This promise seemed impossible. Ibrahim was already an old man. His wife Sarah was also elderly. For ordinary people, hope would have disappeared long ago. But nothing is impossible for Allah. Sarah's astonishment. Sarah stood nearby listening. When she heard the news, she reacted with amazement. The Quran records her words. Shall I give birth while I am an old woman, and this my husband is an old man? This is truly an amazing thing. Surah Hud 11 hours 72 minutes. The angels answered gently. Do you wonder at the decree of Allah? When Allah wills something, age is no obstacle. Nature is no limitation. The creator of life is never restricted by the laws he created. A miracle greater than age. Think about what this meant. Years earlier, Allah had granted Ibrahim Ismail through Hajar. Now, long after youth had passed, another son would be born through Sarah. Not because medicine could explain it, not because nature allowed it, but because Allah simply said, be, and it would be. The same Lord who created Adam without parents could certainly grant elderly parents a child. A hidden mission. The joyful news was only part of the angels' visit. Their second mission was far more serious. They said, we have been sent to the people of Lut. Surah Hud 11 hours 70 minutes. Their destination lay beyond Ibrahim's home. The cities where Prophet Lut AS lived. Cities that had rejected Allah's guidance. Cities that had become consumed by open corruption and defiance despite repeated warnings from their prophet. The Quran presents their destruction as a consequence of persistent disbelief and grave wrongdoing after those warnings. The compassion of Ibrahim. When Ibrahim understood the angel's mission, his heart became heavy. He knew Lut. According to Islamic tradition, Lut AS was Ibrahim's nephew and a fellow prophet. Even after hearing Allah's decree, Ibrahim hoped for mercy. The Quran tells us that after his fear departed and the good news reached him, he pleaded concerning the people of Lut. This reveals something beautiful, even toward people who had rejected the truth. Ibrahim's first instinct was compassion. The angel's gentle reply. The angels listened. Then they answered respectfully. Allah's judgment had already been decided. The time for repentance had passed. Years of warning had been ignored. The decree would not be delayed. Yet they reassured Ibrahim. Lot and the believing members of his household would be rescued before the punishment arrived, except for those whom Allah had decreed otherwise. The lesson hidden in hospitality. This meeting teaches several timeless lessons. A prophet welcomed strangers without hesitation. He served them before asking questions. He remained humble despite his greatness. He trusted Allah even when hearing impossible news. And he showed mercy even toward those facing judgment. These qualities became part of Ibrahim's everlasting legacy. The promise begins to unfold. The angels soon departed. Their destination lay beyond the horizon. Sarah quietly reflected on the impossible promise. Ibrahim stood watching the travelers disappear into the distance. He knew that whenever Allah made a promise, it never failed. Another prophet would be born, a child through whom another blessed lineage would continue. But first, the angels had one final destination, the home of Prophet Lot AS. And one of the most dramatic nights in Quranic history was about to begin, a prophet in a corrupted land. While Ibrahim AS remained in peace after the departure of the angels, another prophet struggled many miles away. His name was Lot AS. He had once traveled alongside Ibrahim. He had witnessed the unwavering faith of his noble uncle. Now Allah had entrusted him with a difficult mission. He was sent to a people who had abandoned righteousness. For years, he called them back to Allah. He reminded them of justice, of purity, of mercy, of repentance. But every warning was met with mockery. Every invitation was answered with arrogance. The Quran records Lot's repeated call to his people, urging them to fear Allah and abandon their grave sins. Yet they refused to listen. A society that rejected every warning. The corruption of Lot's people was not hidden. It had become public. They openly challenged Allah's commands. They celebrated immorality instead of feeling shame. Travelers feared passing through their cities. The weak found little protection. Sin had become ordinary. Repentance had become rare. Lot did not stop preaching. Day after day, year after year, he continued inviting them to worship Allah alone, not because success was guaranteed, but because prophets never abandon their mission. The visitors arrive. As evening settled over the city, 3 young travelers entered its gates. Their appearance was striking. They were remarkably handsome. Their faces shone with dignity. No one in the city knew. These were the very angels who had just visited Ibrahim. Nor did anyone know their true purpose. They carried no weapons. They spoke gently. They appeared to be ordinary human travelers. Lot's immediate concern. When Lot saw the visitors, his heart sank. The Quran describes his distress. When our messengers came to Lot, he was distressed for them and felt powerless to protect them. Surah Hud 11 hours 77 minutes. Why would a prophet fear for honored guests? Because he knew his people. He knew what they were capable of. He understood the danger these strangers faced if the city discovered them. His home suddenly became the only place of safety. A difficult evening. Lot welcomed the travelers into his home. He closed the door. His mind raced. Outside, the streets grew darker. Inside, the guests remained calm. They knew exactly what would happen. Lot did not. He believed they were ordinary men. He worried every passing moment. The news spreads. Before long, word spread throughout the city. Beautiful strangers had arrived. People rushed through the streets. Voices grew louder. Footsteps echoed outside Lot's home. A crowd gathered at his door. The Quran says, his people came rushing toward him. Surah Hud 11 hours 78 minutes. This was no ordinary visit. It was the final test before Allah's judgment. A prophet's plea. Standing before the angry crowd, Lot begged them to fear Allah. He pleaded with them not to disgrace him before his guests. He reminded them of right and wrong, of honor, of dignity. His words came from deep compassion. Even at this final hour, he still wanted them to repent, still hoped they would turn back. still prayed they would save themselves. Hearts that had become hard. But the crowd refused. Their arrogance had reached its peak. Instead of listening, they mocked their prophet. They ignored every warning. Years of preaching, years of patience, years of mercy, all rejected. The opportunity for repentance was slipping away. The angels revealed themselves. At that critical moment, the visitors finally spoke. They said, "O Lut, indeed we are messengers of your Lord. They will never reach you." Surah Hud 11 hours 81 minutes. Everything changed instantly. These were not helpless travelers. They were angels, sent directly by Allah. The crowd outside could do nothing against Allah's decree. Lut's fear disappeared. Allah had already taken control of the situation. The final command. Then the angels gave Lut one last instruction. Leave the city. Take your family. Travel during the night. Do not look back. The Quran says, "So travel with your family during a portion of the night, and let none of you look back." Surah Hud 11 hours 81 minutes. There was only one exception. Lut's wife. Although she lived with a prophet, she had chosen the path of disbelief. She supported the corruption of her people rather than the message of Allah. The Quran makes clear that family ties alone do not guarantee salvation. Faith and obedience to Allah are what matter. Leaving before dawn. Imagine that silent journey. The stars stretched across the desert sky. The air was cool. No voices. No crowds. Only a small group of believers quietly leaving everything behind. Their homes, their possessions, their memories. They walked forward, trusting Allah completely. Behind them, the city still slept, unaware that history was about to change forever. The morning of judgment. As dawn approached, Allah's decree arrived. The Quran describes the punishment in powerful words. The cities were overturned. A rain of stones descended by Allah's command. The destruction was sudden, complete, and unlike anything the people had imagined. This punishment came only after prolonged rejection of Allah's message and persistent wrongdoing despite repeated warnings from Prophet Lut AS. A landscape changed forever. When the sun rose, the thriving cities were gone. Silence replaced noise. Dust covered what had once been streets and homes. The land itself became a lasting sign, not because Allah delights in punishment, but because justice eventually comes after truth has been made clear and persistently rejected. Throughout the Quran, the story of Lut's people is repeated as a warning against arrogance, corruption, and turning away from divine guidance. The escape of the believers. Lut and the believers continued their journey safely. They did not witness the destruction. Allah had protected them exactly as He had promised Ibrahim. Every promise made by Allah had been fulfilled. The angel's mission was complete. One prophet had received glad tidings. Another had been rescued. And divine justice had been carried out. Back to Ibrahim. Far away. Ibrahim continued waiting for the promise he had received. Sarah still remembered the astonishing words of the angels. A child in old age. A future prophet. A blessed grandson. What had once seemed impossible was drawing closer with every passing day. The story of Ibrahim was entering a new chapter. Not one of sacrifice, not one of migration, but one of miraculous birth and the continuation of the prophetic legacy. The eternal lesson. The stories of Ibrahim and Lut stand side by side in the Quran for a reason. One teaches unwavering faith. The other reminds humanity that mercy is always offered before judgment. Allah sent warnings, prophets, signs, years of opportunity. Only when every invitation to repentance had been persistently rejected did divine judgment come. For those who believe, these stories are not merely accounts of the past. They are reminders that sincerity, patience, repentance, and trust in Allah remain the path to His mercy in every age. A promise that never fails. The desert had returned to its familiar rhythm. Days became weeks. Weeks became months. Life appeared ordinary. The wind still swept across the valleys. The stars still filled the Arabian sky each night. The Kaaba stood peacefully in Mecca. Zamzam continued flowing from the earth. Caravans crossed the desert as they always had. To those watching from afar, nothing seemed unusual. But inside the home of Ibrahim AS, a miracle was quietly approaching. For Allah had made a promise. And Allah never breaks his promise. Sarah waits in hope. Sarah remembered every word spoken by the angels. At first, the promise had seemed beyond imagination. She had laughed in astonishment, not out of disbelief in Allah's power, but because the news was so unexpected. She and Ibrahim had spent a lifetime together. The years had passed. Their youth had faded. They had accepted that no child would ever be born to them. Yet Allah had chosen this very moment, when all human hope had nearly disappeared, to demonstrate that his power is beyond every worldly limitation. When the impossible became reality, the day arrived. Sarah conceived. The impossible had become possible. No physician could explain it. No natural expectation could predict it. It happened because Allah had decreed it. The Quran repeatedly reminds believers that whenever Allah intends something, He simply says, "Be," and it comes into existence. The same Lord who created Adam without parents, who saved Ibrahim from the fire, who brought Zamzam from the barren earth, now granted a child to elderly parents. Every miracle pointed to the same truth. Nothing is difficult for Allah. The birth of Ishaq AS. Months later, joy filled the household. A son was born. His name was Ishaq AS. Imagine Ibrahim holding his newborn son. His beard had already turned white. His hands bore the marks of a lifetime of struggle. Hands that had built the Kaaba. Hands that had once prepared to sacrifice Ismail in obedience to Allah. Now, those same hands gently held another son. A child promised directly by the angels. A child whose birth itself was a miracle. The house echoed with gratitude. Every smile became an act of worship. Every prayer became one of thankfulness. Sarah's tears of happiness. For Sarah, the moment was beyond words. Years of waiting. Years of quiet acceptance. Years of patience. Allah had answered in a way no one could have imagined. The Quran honors Sarah by preserving the moment when she received the glad tidings of Ishaq. Her astonishment became part of revelation itself. Future generations would forever remember that Allah's mercy often arrives when human expectations have faded. 2 sons, 1 mission. Now Ibrahim had 2 noble sons. Ismail AS and Ishaq AS. Different mothers, different homes, yet united by one purpose. Both would worship Allah alone. Both would become prophets. Both would carry the message of Tawhid. There was never rivalry between them. Only brotherhood. Only faith. Only obedience. Their lives would unfold in different lands, but their destination remained the same. The pleasure of Allah. The family chosen by Allah. The Quran repeatedly speaks of the special blessing placed upon Ibrahim's family. Prophethood would continue through his descendants. Generation after generation. Allah selected righteous servants from among them, not because of family name alone, but because they believed, obeyed, and remained steadfast. Honor in Islam is never inherited automatically. It is earned through faith and righteousness. The promise of Yaqub AS. The angels had promised more than Ishaq. They had also mentioned another name, Yaqub AS. Even before Ishaq was born, Allah had already informed Ibrahim that his grandson would also become one of the righteous. This was remarkable. The future had already been written by the one who knows everything. Years later, that promise would also come true. Yaqub would become a prophet, and from his children, another extraordinary chapter of sacred history would begin. 2 blessed lineages. With the birth of Ishaq, the family of Ibrahim became the source of 2 great prophetic lineages. Through Ismail AS, the lineage would remain in Arabia. Generations later, Allah would send the final messenger, Prophet Muhammad, from among the descendants of Ismail, through Ishaq AS. The lineage continued through Yaqub AS, also known as Israel. From Yaqub came many prophets including Yusuf AS, Musa AS, Harun AS, Dawud AS, Sulaiman AS, Zachariah AS, Yahya AS, and Isa AS. Peace be upon them all. One family, one message, one creator, across centuries, across continents, the father of prophets. Because of these blessings, Ibrahim became known in Islamic tradition as Abu al-Anbiya, the father of the prophets. Never before had one individual become the ancestor of so many prophets. Yet despite this honor, he remained humble. He never claimed greatness for himself. His prayers always began with gratitude. His heart always remained attached to Allah alone. That is why Allah elevated him. True greatness belongs to those who humble themselves before their Creator. A home filled with worship. Imagine Ibrahim's household during these years. Two noble sons growing under the guidance of a prophet. Every morning began with remembrance of Allah. Every evening ended with gratitude. Stories of Allah's mercy filled their conversations. The fire that never burned. The birds brought back to life. The sacrifice that became a ram. The spring of Zamzam. The rebuilding of the Kaaba. Every miracle reminded the family of one lesson. Trust Allah completely. The wisdom of waiting. Many people ask, why did Allah delay Sarah's child until old age? The Quran does not give a direct answer, but it teaches a timeless lesson. Sometimes Allah delays a blessing, not to withhold it, but to reveal His wisdom at the perfect moment. If Ishaq had been born during Ibrahim's youth, people might have called it ordinary. Instead, Allah made the impossible happen before everyone's eyes, so that no one could doubt His power, preparing the next generation. As the years passed, Ibrahim devoted himself to teaching both sons. Not wealth, not kingdoms, not worldly power. He taught them faith, sincerity, prayer, patience, submission to Allah. These lessons became the true inheritance of the prophets. Gold disappears. Empires collapse. Knowledge of Allah remains forever. The journey continues. Ibrahim had now witnessed countless miracles. Yet his mission was not over. New generations were rising. New prophets would soon carry the light of revelation into lands far beyond Arabia. The family of Ibrahim would become the bridge connecting centuries of divine guidance. And among his descendants, one story would shine with remarkable beauty. The story of a young prophet whose patience would become legendary. His name was Yaqub AS. And after him would come one of the most beloved stories ever revealed in the Quran, the story of Yusuf AS. But before that chapter, the life of Ibrahim himself still held precious final lessons for humanity. The sunset of a blessed life. Every life has its evening. Even the lives of prophets. The years continued to pass. The young boys who had once walked beside Ibrahim AS had become men. Ismail AS had grown into a noble prophet in the sacred valley of Mecca. Ishaq AS had become a righteous prophet in the land of Canaan. The family Allah had promised was flourishing. The seeds planted through decades of sacrifice were now bearing fruit. Ibrahim looked upon his children with gratitude, not because they brought him worldly honor, but because they remained servants of Allah. For a father, there is no greater joy. A lifetime written in faith. Imagine Ibrahim sitting beneath the evening sky. His hair had turned completely white. His hands carried the marks of a lifetime spent in worship and service. Every scar held a memory. The fire of Babylon, the migration away from his homeland, the long deserts, the birth of Ismail, the loneliness of leaving Hajar and her infant son in the barren valley, the spring of Zamzam, the rebuilding of the Kaaba, the command to sacrifice his beloved son, the miraculous birth of Ishaq. Every chapter of his life pointed to one truth. Allah had never abandoned him. Not once. His greatest concern. As old age approached, Ibrahim's greatest concern was not his wealth, not his home, not his reputation. His greatest concern was faith. The Quran preserves one of the most touching moments between Ibrahim and his children. Allah says, "And Ibrahim instructed his sons, and so did Yaqub, saying, O my sons, Allah has chosen for you this religion, so do not die except while you are in submission, Muslims, to him." Surah Al-Baqarah 2:132. Notice what he emphasized. Not success, not power, not fame. He wanted his children to meet Allah with faith in their hearts. The greatest inheritance. Many parents leave behind land, gold, businesses, or titles. Ibrahim left something greater. The worship of Allah alone. His children inherited Tawhid. Generation after generation. That message continued, not because of family tradition, but because every prophet renewed the same invitation. Worship Allah alone. The message never changed. Only the generations changed. The friend of Allah. Among all the honors given to Ibrahim, one stands above every other. Allah chose him as Khalilullah, the close friend of Allah. The Quran says, "And Allah took Ibrahim as a close friend." Surah An-Nisa 4:125. This title was not earned through miracles alone, nor through lineage, nor through age. It came through complete sincerity. Every test strengthened his trust. Every hardship increased his patience. Every blessing increased his gratitude. Until Allah honored him with a title granted to very few. The final days. The Quran does not describe every detail of Ibrahim's final illness or his final moments. Rather than focusing on those details, it directs our attention to the life he lived. Islamic historical reports state that Ibrahim lived a very long life before returning to his Lord, but the Quran itself does not specify his exact age or describe the circumstances of his passing. His story was never about how he died. It was about how he lived, with faith, with courage, with unwavering trust, returning to his Lord. Imagine the peace of his final days. No regret over wasted years. No sorrow for worldly losses. Everything he had sacrificed, Allah had replaced with something greater. He had left his homeland. Allah gave him nations. He had been willing to sacrifice his son. Allah blessed him with generations of prophets. He had built a simple house in a barren valley. Allah made it the center of worship for millions. Nothing given for Allah is ever truly lost. Where was Ibrahim buried? According to long-standing Islamic tradition as well as Jewish and Christian tradition, Ibrahim AS was buried in the city of Hebron in present-day Palestine. The site traditionally associated with his burial is known today as the Cave of the Patriarchs. While this location has been honored for centuries, the Quran itself does not identify his burial place. Instead, the Quran emphasizes his faith and his example rather than the location of his grave. A legacy that changed the world. Few people influence history. Even fewer influence eternity. Ibrahim did both. Through Isma, the final messenger Muhammad would arise in Mecca. Through Ishaq and Yaqub, many prophets would guide the children of Israel. Across centuries, across continents, billions would know his name. Not as a king, not as a conqueror, but as a servant of Allah. The Kaaba still stands. Thousands of years have passed. Empires that once filled history books have vanished. Babylon became ruins. Ancient kingdoms disappeared beneath the sands. But the Kaaba remains. Every day, millions of Muslims face its direction in prayer. Every year, pilgrims circle the house built by Ibrahim and Ismail. The call announced in the desert still echoes around the world. A father and son once carried stones beneath the Arabian sun. Today, their work continues to unite believers from every nation. The religion of Ibrahim. The Quran repeatedly calls believers to follow the religion of Ibrahim. Not a new religion, not a separate path, but the pure worship of Allah alone. Allah says, "Then we revealed to you, follow the religion of Ibrahim inclining toward truth, and he was not among those who associated partners with Allah." Surah An-Nahl 16:123. His life became the living definition of submission. That is why Muslims honor him every day. Every prayer includes blessings upon Muhammad and Ibrahim AS. Every Hajj follows rites connected to his family. His example lives on in acts of worship performed by millions. The lessons that never grow old. The life of Ibrahim teaches timeless lessons. When the world rejects the truth, stand firm. When faith demands sacrifice, trust Allah. When blessings are delayed, remain patient. When success arrives, stay humble. When trials become heavy, remember that Allah never abandons those who rely upon him. His story is not merely history. It is guidance for every generation. The end of one story, the beginning of many others. The life of Ibrahim had reached its earthly conclusion, but his legacy had only begun. His grandson Yaqub would continue the prophetic mission. From Yaqub would come Yusuf, later Musa, Harun, Dawud, Sulaiman, Zachariah, Yahya, Isa, and finally, from the family of Ismail, Muhammad. One family, one message, one creator. The light that began with Ibrahim continued to illuminate humanity through generations of prophets. An everlasting example, even today. When a believer places complete trust in Allah during hardship, the spirit of Ibrahim's example lives on. When pilgrims drink from Zamzam, his story is remembered. When millions answer the call of Hajj, his obedience is honored. When the Quran is recited, his name returns again and again, not because he sought greatness, but because he sought Allah. And Allah granted him a legacy that time itself could never erase.